Ever thought you knew everything about someone, only to find out their life was just the tip of an unimaginable iceberg? I used to live a life of routine, family, friends, and the occasional bump in the road. But nothing prepared me for the day my husband, Mark, vanished. His unexpected return unveiled a world of secrets, dangerous syndicates, and betrayals close to home. My family was hurled into a whirlwind adventure, making us question everything we once held true. If you're curious about how a seemingly ordinary family navigated the dark underbelly of crime, deception, and revenge, I invite you to delve into our journey. What you'll find might just change your perception of the people around you forever. My name is Anna, and this is my story. It was a crisp Tuesday morning when I woke up to find the left side of my bed cold and empty. Initially, I assumed Mark, my husband of 7 years, had woken up earlier for a jog or to get some breakfast. However, as the day wore on, I noticed his phone, wallet, and car were still in their usual spots. The unsettling feeling in my gut grew stronger. By evening, panic had completely taken over. Neither his workplace nor any of our friends or family had seen him. The kids were restless, continually asking, "Where's Daddy?" Holding back tears, I always replied with, "He must be busy, he'll be back soon." However, soon turned into weeks, and weeks turned into months. No calls, no texts, no notes, no nothing. Just pure silence. The police were of little help. With no evidence of foul play, they marked him as a voluntary missing person. My heart shattered. How could the love of my life, the father of our 3 children, leave without any explanation? Every day was a challenge. I tried to be both a mother and father to my kids, all while battling the betrayal and anger boiling inside me. How could he do this? Why? Was our love not enough? I constantly thought to myself. But amid the anger, there was a glimmer of hope, a burning desire for closure, and an inkling of revenge. If he had chosen to desert us, I wasn't about to let him forget us so easily. Fast forward to a year later. I had returned from a long day of work, kids in tow, when I found a letter on our doorstep. My heart raced as I recognized the familiar handwriting. It was from Mark. "Dear Anna, I don't expect forgiveness. I don't even know if I deserve a chance to explain myself. But if you're willing to hear me out, meet me at the old tree house we built together tomorrow evening at 5 p.m. Mark." I read the note over and over, each time feeling a mix of anger, pain, and hope. The audacity of this man to disappear for a year and then waltz back into our lives as if nothing happened. "Oh, he's going to get what's coming to him," I muttered to myself. The kids sensed something was off. "Mom, what's that? Is it from Daddy?" My eldest, Max, asked, his eyes wide with a mixture of hope and fear. I hesitated, thinking of the best way to shield them from more pain. "It's nothing, sweetheart. Just an old friend," I replied, avoiding his gaze. That night, sleep eluded me. My mind raced with different scenarios. Was he in trouble? Was he remorseful? Or was this another cruel trick? And then, there was the burning desire for revenge. The pain he inflicted on our family was immeasurable. I wanted him to feel a fraction of the anguish we had been through. As dawn broke, a plan began to form. I was going to give Mark a taste of his own medicine, make him realize the weight of his actions. But first, I needed to meet him, to hear his side of the story. The day dragged on. Every tick of the clock felt like an eternity. And as 5 p.m. approached, I was a mix of anxiety, rage, and anticipation. I left the kids with my neighbor and headed to our old treehouse. As I approached the clearing, I saw a figure standing by the tree. It was Mark, but he looked different, older, wearier. He had lost weight and had a ruggedness to him that I hadn't seen before. "Anna," he whispered as I approached, his voice filled with sorrow. "I thought you'd never come." Little did he know that I was there with a plan, a purpose, and Revenge was its name. As I walked closer, Mark's eyes welled up with tears, but I was unmoved. The hollow look in his eyes did nothing to soften the stone that my heart had become. The kids' endless nights of crying, their questions about their father, the bills piling up, and my sleepless nights flashed before my eyes. "Anna, I'm so sore." I cut him off. "Sorry? You think saying sorry now will fix everything?" My voice trembled, not just with anger, but with the weight of the suppressed emotions from the past year. "Where were you, Mark? Why did you leave us?" Mark looked down, taking a deep breath. "I can't justify my actions, Anna. I made a terrible mistake, but I had my reasons." I laughed bitterly. Reasons? What possible reasons could make a man abandon his family without a word? He looked up, eyes searching mine. "It's not as simple as you think, Anna. I had no choice. I was trying to protect you all." I scoffed. "Protect us? By leaving us alone, vulnerable and broken? Some protection, that is." Mark hesitated, taking a moment to gather his thoughts. "Anna, I got involved with some dangerous people, and I became privy to information I shouldn't have known. Staying would have put you and the kids in danger. I thought distancing myself would keep you safe." Willie, a part of me wanted to believe him. The anger and pain were too overwhelming. "So you played hero and left us to fend for ourselves? You could have at least left a note, a message, something. Instead, you left a gaping hole in our lives." Mark's voice cracked. "I know, and I can never make up for it, but I'm here now, and I want to make things right." That's when my plan for revenge kicked in. "All right, Mark, you want to make things right? Here's what you're going to do." I explained my plan to him, detailing every step. I could see the dread in his eyes, but he didn't object. My revenge was simple but effective. Mark was going to experience the same loneliness, fear, and uncertainty that we had faced for the past year. For the next month, Mark would live in the treehouse, cut off from the world. No phone, no contact, no comforts. Just him and his thoughts. He would get a taste of what it felt like to be isolated, abandoned, and forgotten. Every weekend, I would visit him, not to comfort, but to remind him of the pain he had caused. That night, I left him in the treehouse with just a blanket and some canned food. As I walked away, I couldn't help but feel a pang of satisfaction. This is for the kids, I thought to myself. He needs to understand the pain he caused. Over the next few weeks, I visited Mark as planned. Each time, he looked more forlorn, more broken, the weight of his mistakes pressing down on him. But each visit also rekindled a spark, a connection we once shared. While I wanted him to feel the pain, I also found myself wrestling with the love that still lingered deep within me. One Saturday, as I approached the treehouse, I found Mark feverishly scribbling in a makeshift journal made from scraps of paper and tied together with twigs. He looked up, eyes filled with a mix of pain and determination. "Anna," he began, "I've been writing, reflecting on everything, and while this punishment is hard, it's given me time to think, to realize the gravity of my mistakes. I want to share this with you, my reflections, my regrets." His words struck a chord, and I found myself torn between my thirst for revenge and the lingering love I still felt for the man before me. The coming weeks would prove to be a journey, not just for Mark, but for me as well. The path of revenge had taken an unexpected turn, one that I hadn't foreseen. Week 5 was when things started to shift. The plan was clear: make Mark feel what we felt. But every weekend, as I climbed up to the treehouse, I was met with not just a broken man, but a transformative one. His writings painted vivid imagery of our past, our love, our dreams and hopes, all intertwined with his deepest regrets. He shared stories from his journal, and each entry was like a window into his soul. One particular entry stood out: Day 28. Every day I wake up to the chirping of birds, and as the cold seeps through my bones, I'm reminded of the warmth I willingly left behind. Anna, I dreamt of our first date last night, the laughter, the stolen glances. Waking up to this reality feels like a nightmare. I understand now, more than ever, the magnitude of my mistakes. Reading his words, the anger inside me began to dissipate, replaced by a myriad of emotions. Memories flooded back. Our first date, the birth of our children, the life we built. The weight of my revenge suddenly felt heavy on my shoulders. One evening, as I approached the treehouse, I found Mark engrossed in a sketch. He was drawing our family, using charcoal from the burnt-out logs of his small campfire. The raw emotion captured in that rudimentary artwork was palpable. "Anna," he said without looking up, "I've realized that living without you and the kids, even for this short period, is a fate worse than death. I've felt a loneliness that's deeper than the physical isolation of this treehouse." His voice trembled. "Every day, I see the kids playing in the backyard from this tiny window. Hearing their laughter, yet not being able to hold or comfort them, has been torture. But it's a pain I've earned, and a pain I needed to understand the depth of what I put you all through." My heart ached. The revenge that once felt so just and warranted now felt misguided. But there were still so many questions left unanswered. The doubts remained. Why did he get involved with these dangerous people? Why not confide in me? One day, he handed me a folded piece of paper from his journal. It was a letter addressed to those very questions. "Anna, I never meant for any of this. It started innocently, a business venture with an old college friend, but it quickly spiraled into a web of deceit and danger. They had ties to criminal syndicates, and I inadvertently became a witness to their illegal activities. I overheard plans, dangerous ones. And when they realized I knew, they threatened our family. My instinct was to protect you, but in my panic, I chose flight over fight. Every day I spent away was agony. The guilt consumed me, but the fear of those men finding you held me back. I thought staying away would keep you safe. Now, I understand it was the worst mistake of my life." Mark. As the weeks passed, my visits to the treehouse became less about reminding Mark of his errors and more about rekindling our bond. My revenge had set us on a path neither of us had expected, a path of understanding, healing, and redemption. But the journey was far from over. Mark's revelations about his entanglement with the criminal syndicate shocked me to the core. The heavy weight of fear and insecurity from the past year now had a name. But the more pressing question was, if he was willing to come back, were they still a threat? "Mark," I whispered one chilly evening, the words escaping through trembling lips. "If they're still out there, aren't we all in danger?" He gazed out from the treehouse's tiny window, his eyes scanning the shadows beyond our garden. "I've thought of that too," he admitted. "But I made sure to leave them with a strong impression that I wouldn't spill their secrets. They believe that if they leave our family alone, their operations remain safe." The very idea that we were bargaining our safety against the secrecy of a criminal empire was terrifying. But Mark had a plan. He'd had a lot of time to think, after all. I reached out to an old contact, someone trustworthy from my college days, now in the FBI. I've sent him everything I know, anonymously, of course. If things go according to plan, they'll be rounded up soon, and we won't have to live in fear. As days turned into weeks, Mark's information began to make waves. Without revealing his identity, he had tipped off the authorities about several ongoing operations. News started trickling in about arrests and raids on syndicate hideouts. The web of crime started to unravel, and we dared to hope. But revenge has a funny way of looping back. My actions, designed to punish Mark for his absence, had unexpectedly made him a cornerstone in dismantling a criminal empire. And while we reveled in our newfound hope, we knew that the conclusion was imminent. I began to notice unfamiliar cars parked at a distance, men in sunglasses watching the house. Paranoia grew. Had they connected the dots? Was Mark's cover blown? One afternoon, as I played with the kids in the garden, an unknown number flashed on my phone. Answering it, I heard a distorted voice. "You think you can hide from us? You'll regret it." Fear clawed at me. I looked up to see Mark gazing down from the treehouse, a somber expression on his face. He had overheard the threat. But amidst the fear, a thought gnawed at me. What if we turned the tables one last time? Together, we hatched a plan. We'd bring the danger to our doorstep and confront it head-on. Using his contacts, Mark arranged for law enforcement to be on standby. And then, we baited the trap. Mark sent out a message, one that indicated he had more information that he'd release unless they backed off. The evening was tense. We fortified the house and waited. The quiet of the night was broken by the sound of approaching vehicles. Headlights flashed, silhouettes approached, and then all hell broke loose. But the syndicate didn't expect what awaited them. As they made their move, floodlights illuminated the garden, blinding them. Law enforcement agencies swooped in, catching them off guard. It was a confrontation, but it was one-sided. In the aftermath of the takedown, Mark was heralded as an unsung hero. His anonymity preserved, he played a pivotal role in bringing down a major crime ring. But that was secondary to our primary victory. Our family, once fractured and lost, was whole again. Yet, as I laid in bed that night, one burning question remained. Was our journey truly over? Or were we merely at the cusp of another adventure? Only time would tell. The next few months were a dizzying whirlwind. As a family, we took a collective decision to move, seeking anonymity in a smaller town far from our past haunts. It wasn't just about evading remnants of the syndicate, but also about starting fresh, free from the specters of our past. Life in the countryside was different, calmer. The kids adapted quickly, losing themselves in the vast fields and forests. Mark took up a teaching job in a local community college, and I started a small online business. Our once fractured lives were mending. There were moments, though, when the weight of our shared history would crash down on us, especially on quiet nights, when the howling of the wind echoed the haunting memories of our past. One evening, as Mark and I sat on our porch, watching a breathtaking sunset, a black car pulled up in our driveway. The sight immediately filled me with trepidation. Could they have found us? I thought. But then, a familiar face emerged. It was Brian, Mark's college friend and our FBI contact. "We're not fully in the clear yet," Brian began, his face grave. "Some of the syndicate's members evaded arrest, and they're regrouping. They might not know where you are now, but they're looking." Mark's face darkened. "I thought we were done with this." "We almost are," Brian reassured. "We just need something more, a final piece of evidence to put them away for good. The leader, the one truly pulling the strings, has been elusive. We believe he's overseas, but we have a lead, a meeting point where they plan to regroup." Mark's eyes narrowed. "What do you need from us?" Brian sighed. "A bait, and that bait is you, Mark. We'll ensure your safety, of course. If this works, it'll be the end. Forever." I felt a shiver run down my spine. The thought of putting our family in danger again was unbearable. But there was also the promise of finality, of permanently ending the nightmare that had shadowed us. With a heavy heart, and after many discussions, Mark agreed. It was time for one last game of cat and mouse. Brian's team meticulously planned the operation, ensuring layers of protection around Mark. The chosen location was an old warehouse, and I insisted on being close, hiding in a surveillance van with Brian. The night of the operation was agonizing. From the van, I watched Mark, a lone figure, waiting. Hours dragged on, until finally a limousine pulled up. Out stepped a figure, face hidden by shadows, but the unmistakable aura of power evident. As they conversed, Brian's team prepared to strike. But suddenly, alarms blared. The warehouse was rigged. A cloud of smoke enveloped the area. Through the haze, figures clashed, shots were fired. My heart raced. "Where's Mark?" I thought, panic flooding me. After what felt like an eternity, the smoke cleared. Bodies lay strewn around, but Mark was standing, a bit disheveled, but alive. And beside him, handcuffed, was the syndicate leader, a face I never expected. It was Mr. Thompson, our neighbor from our old life. Brian emerged from the van, a victorious smile on his face. "We got him," he said, clasping Mark's hand. The following months saw the syndicate crumble. With their leader in custody and most of their operations exposed, they were finished. Mr. Thompson's arrest made headlines, revealing his double life as a seemingly benign neighbor and a global crime lord. Our life returned to its peaceful rhythm. The scars of our past remained but faded with time. We became local heroes, with our story of resilience and love turning into the stuff of legends in our small town. The past's shadows receded, and as we moved forward, we held on to each other tighter, knowing that together we could overcome any storm. And so, our tale comes to a close, not with an ending, but with a new beginning. Waking up alone in Paris on your honeymoon is an unsettling start to any day. Hi, I'm Lisa. Our Parisian getaway, meant to be woven with dreams and shared memories, took a dark detour into a web of secrets when I found an odd message instead of my husband beside me one morning. Suddenly, our love story intertwined with cryptic clues and shadowy figures from the past. Venture with me into a Paris that hides its mysteries behind every romantic facade and uncover truths that tested not just our bond, but our very survival. So, my name is Lisa, and this is my Parisian story. The glow of the morning sun on Parisian rooftops was breathtaking. I stretched, luxuriating in the satin sheets of our boutique hotel room, reveling in the faint sounds of the bustling Paris streets below. I turned to snuggle closer to my new husband, Alex, but instead of the warmth of his body, I found a cold and empty space. Perplexed, I sat up, scanning the room for any sign of him. His suitcase was still there, clothes thrown casually on a chair from the night before, but no Alex in sight. On his side of the bed, there was a folded piece of hotel stationery. With shaking hands, I opened it. "Morning, love. Took a quick walk to grab some fresh pastries for us. Be back soon." I sighed with relief. But then something caught my eye. On the back of the note, written in a shaky script, unlike Alex's usual neat handwriting, "Don't trust anyone." I felt a chill run down my spine. What was this? A joke? But Alex wasn't one for practical jokes, especially not on our honeymoon. Pulling on some clothes, I decided to go down to the hotel lobby. Maybe he was just there, waiting with a basket of croissants, laughing at his little prank. The hallway was quiet, the muted gold wallpaper gleaming softly. I took the elevator, trying to shake off the unsettling feeling. The elevator doors opened to a bustling lobby, but no sign of Alex. I approached the receptionist, a tall woman with raven black hair and striking red lipstick. "Excuse me," I began. "Have you seen my husband? Tall, brown hair, green eyes?" She looked up, her gaze cold and distant. "No, madame. I haven't seen anyone matching that description." I thought back to the mysterious message. "Don't trust anyone." Panic bubbled up, and my mind raced. Maybe he'd been kidnapped? But why? We were just two newlyweds from Ohio. Suddenly, I remembered something. A week before our wedding, Alex had mentioned an old college rival, Derek, who had become extremely wealthy and influential after a major tech breakthrough. They had both been in competition for the same job, and Alex had won. Derek had never forgiven him. The pieces started to come together. What if Derek was in Paris? What if he had found out about our honeymoon destination and planned something to get back at Alex? I decided I needed to act. The police would take too long, and Alex might be in danger now. So I thought of a plan. First, I needed to gather information. Derek had a prominent online presence. If he was indeed in Paris, there would be some digital trail. I headed to a nearby internet cafe, blending in with the tourists. Within an hour, I found a photo on Derek's Instagram, standing in front of the Eiffel Tower, uploaded just the day before. My heart raced. This was it. This was the confirmation I needed. But how to get back at him? Then, an idea formed. Derek was a proud owner of a vintage Bugatti, a car he flaunted at every opportunity. I remembered Alex once mentioning that Derek would be devastated if anything happened to it. With newfound determination, I began my revenge plan. I would hit Derek where it hurt the most, his prized possession. But first, I needed to find out where he was staying, and for that, I needed help. I remembered a contact Alex had mentioned, an old college buddy named Ethan who lived in Paris. I decided to reach out to him. Using a burner phone I purchased, I dialed Ethan's number. "Ethan, it's Alex's wife. I need your help." I could hear the surprise in Ethan's voice. "What's going on?" I recounted the story to him, and by the end, he was fully on board. Together, we began our mission to find Derek, save Alex, and deliver the revenge he deserved. The city of love was about to become the city of revenge. Ethan's apartment overlooked Montmartre, giving a panoramic view of Paris. As I explained the situation, his normally relaxed demeanor turned grim. "So, you think Derek has something to do with Alex's disappearance?" "I'm almost sure of it," I replied, "and we need to act quickly." Ethan thought for a moment. "I might have an idea. I know someone who works at a high-end hotel frequented by the rich and famous. If Derek is in Paris, there's a good chance he's staying there. Let's go." With that, we headed to Le Hôtel du Riche, a luxurious palace where the elite of the world stayed. The opulence was evident in the grand chandeliers, gold accents, and lush velvet drapes. Approaching the concierge, Ethan slipped him a folded note discreetly. The man glanced at it, nodded, and then leaned in. "Room 508, but be careful." With the intel in hand, our next step was to get to Derek's room unnoticed. Using Ethan's knowledge of the hotel's layout, we took a service elevator to the 5th floor. As we neared room 508, we could hear muffled voices. Pressing my ear to the door, I strained to make out the words. It sounded like Derek, and he was arguing with someone. "Shouldn't mess with me. This is too risky." That voice, I gasped silently. It was Alex. Taking a deep breath, I looked at Ethan. "We need a plan," I whispered. Ethan nodded. "First, let's find out where he's parked his Bugatti. We can use that as leverage." A few discreet questions to hotel staff and a generous tip later, we found out the Bugatti was parked in an underground hotel garage. But we needed to make sure Derek knew we had access to it. Pulling out my burner phone, I sent a text to Derek's known number. "How much do you think your precious Bugatti is worth?" Almost instantly, a reply buzzed in. "Who is this?" With a smirk, I sent a photo of the car keys, which Ethan had skillfully swiped from the valet. "Want these back? Release Alex." The message was bold, perhaps too bold, but it was a move I was willing to make. My husband's safety was on the line. Minutes felt like hours as we waited for a reply. Finally, it came. "Meet me at Pont des Arts at midnight. Come alone." I looked at Ethan, determination burning in my eyes. I have to go. This is the only way. Ethan tried to dissuade me. It's too dangerous. He's clearly unhinged. But I was resolute. I can't risk Alex's life. We'll play Derek's game, but on our terms. As evening turned to night, the plan was set. Ethan would watch from a distance, ready to intervene if necessary, while I would face Derek head-on. The Pont des Arts, known as the Lovelock Bridge, was an ironic choice, but it would soon be a symbol of our triumph over betrayal. The Pont des Arts was bathed in a soft orange glow from the surrounding streetlights, creating an eerie yet romantic setting. The Seine flowed below, its waters glimmering in the night. I stood at the center of the bridge, my breath visible in the chilly night air. The usually crowded spot was deserted, save for a few distant lovers sharing whispered secrets. Suddenly, I heard footsteps approaching. Turning, I saw Derek's silhouette emerging from the shadows, with Alex, my husband, tied and gagged, stumbling along beside him. "Derek!" I shouted, my heart pounding. "Let him go!" Derek just smirked. "Give me the keys first." I gripped the Bugatti keys tightly, considering my options. But the desperation in Alex's eyes made the decision for me. I held out the keys. "Release him, and they're yours." Derek paused for a moment, a sinister smile playing on his lips. "You always were so predictable, Lisa." As he reached out for the keys, a soft whistle broke the tension. Suddenly, from the shadows, Ethan lunged at Derek, trying to take him by surprise. But Derek was quicker than we anticipated. A scuffle ensued, both men wrestling each other, dangerously close to the edge of the bridge. "Lisa, run!" Ethan shouted, grappling with Derek. I hesitated for a moment, then made a break for it, pulling Alex along with me. But Derek, in a fit of rage, managed to push Ethan off him and lunged at us. In that heart-stopping moment, a brilliant idea flashed in my mind. I remembered the Lovelocks couples attached to the bridge. Scrambling, I quickly locked a heavy chain around Derek's wrist, then snapped the other end onto the bridge's railing, effectively tethering him. He tried to free himself, but it was too late. Ethan, recovering quickly, pinned him down. Derek's arrogant sneer was now replaced with a look of pure rage and disbelief. "What do you want, Lisa?" he growled, struggling against his restraints. "Justice," I replied coldly. "You thought you could play with our lives? Think again." Ethan called the police, and within minutes we heard sirens approaching. Derek was arrested, and Alex, once he was freed and safe, wrapped his arms around me, pulling me close. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice choked with emotion. I was so scared. "We're a team," I whispered back, tears glistening in my eyes. "Always." Derek's luxurious Bugatti? Well, let's just say it made a generous donation to a local charity. And as for the infamous Lovelock, it became a symbol of our victory over betrayal. We returned to our hotel, exhausted from the ordeal. Our suite overlooked the Eiffel Tower, and the city lights twinkled, a stark contrast to the events that had transpired. Alex was quiet, lost in thought, staring out at the view. I walked over, placing my hand on his shoulder. "I'm so sorry you got dragged into all of this," I whispered, my voice heavy with guilt. He turned to me, brushing a strand of hair behind my ear. "Lisa, none of this is your fault. Derek's vendetta was beyond any of our control." Despite the reassurance, the weight of the night bore down on me. I took a deep breath, trying to push back the tears. "I just wanted a perfect honeymoon." Alex smiled gently. "Well, it's definitely been memorable." We both laughed, but our laughter was a mask for the pain and shock of what had unfolded. A few days later, after giving our statements to the police, we decided to head to the Louvre. Surprisingly, the art and history offered a much-needed distraction. As we walked hand in hand through the museum, I felt the tension slowly dissipate. It was then, in the midst of the crowd, that I saw a familiar face. A woman with raven black hair, dressed in a sleek red dress. She was the receptionist at the hotel on the day Alex disappeared. My gut told me she was involved. She locked eyes with me, a smirk playing on her lips, and disappeared into a nearby gallery. I tugged Alex's arm, nodding in her direction. We need to follow her. The chase led us through intricate hallways, past masterpieces, and into the Dinan wing. She was quick, always just out of reach, but she left a trail of subtle clues, a dropped handkerchief, a distinctive scent. Suddenly, she turned a corner and we lost sight of her. We entered a dimly lit room and the door slammed behind us. Panic surged as we realized we were trapped. The room was filled with mirrors, each reflecting our alarmed expressions. "I think we've just stepped into a trap," Alex whispered, his voice tense. From one of the mirrors, the woman emerged, stepping into the room as if by magic. "Indeed you have," she purred, her eyes cold and calculating. "Why are you doing this?" I demanded, fear and anger coursing through me. She smirked. "Because, dear Lisa, the game isn't over yet." "Who are you?" Alex's voice was steady, though I could feel his hand gripping mine tighter. Every instinct told me this was the moment everything came to a head. "My name is Isabel," she purred, circling us with predatory grace. "I was Derek's partner, in more ways than one. When you humiliated him, you humiliated me." "But it's not fair," I exclaimed. "Why are you taking revenge on us? We were just defending ourselves." Isabel paused, taking a deep breath. Her cold demeanor broke for a split second, and I saw the anguish behind her eyes. "After your prank, Derek became the laughing stock of our community. The humiliation was too much for him. He took his own life yesterday." My heart sank. I had known Derek was deeply embarrassed, but I hadn't known the true depth of his despair. The weight of his teeth pressed on me, making it hard to breathe. I had no idea," I murmured, guilt gnawing at me. "Of course you didn't," Isabella hissed, regaining her icy demeanor. "But that's why we're here. It's time to finish what Derek started." I stared at her, trying to piece together the situation. "And what would that be? Another elaborate game?" She smirked. "Exactly. What do you want?" Alex's voice was firm, his protective instincts kicking in. Isabel approached a grand mirror, its frame ornate and gold. "Behind one of these mirrors lies a door that will lead you to freedom. Behind the others? Well, let's just say they won't be so forgiving." The realization hit me like a ton of bricks. This was her revenge, a deadly game of chance. "I'll give you 5 minutes," Isabel declared, her eyes gleaming. "Good luck." She vanished as mysteriously as she'd appeared, leaving us surrounded by mirrors that seemed to mock our desperation. Each reflection twisted our features, showing the gravity of our situation. Alex and I quickly tried tapping on the mirrors, listening for hollow sounds. The minutes ticked away, and my heart raced faster with each passing second. "Think, Lisa," I whispered to myself. Then, it hit me. The dropped handkerchief. The scent. Isabel wanted us to follow her. She wanted the game to be fair, in a twisted way. I approached a mirror to the far right, one that seemed to reflect the room with more clarity than the others. As I touched its surface, the mirror swung open, revealing a passageway. "This is it!" I shouted. Alex and I dashed through, just as the room behind us erupted in a cacophony of shattering glass. We didn't stop running until we were back in the crowded hallways of the Louvre. As we caught our breath, the weight of everything that had happened began to sink in. But amidst the chaos, there was one silver lining. Our relationship had been tested in the most unimaginable way, and we had come out stronger. We left Paris shortly after, our honeymoon forever marred by the events that unfolded. But as we began our lives together, one thing was certain. We could handle anything that came our way. Years passed, and the memories of that fateful trip began to fade. Yet, one evening, a package arrived at our doorstep. Inside was a framed photograph of us at the Louvre, taken by a stranger. On the back, a note simply read, "For the memories, Isabel." The game, it seemed, was never truly over. I've always lived by the code of silence. No flaunting, no arrogance, just silent gratitude for the hand I'd been dealt. When I married Jamie, I was happy and content, but his mother, oh boy, she was something else. A whirlwind of skepticism and bitterness, she accused me of being a gold digger, only after Jamie's wealth, which, honestly, wasn't that much to begin with. Little did she know about my $1,000,000 secret. We met at a cozy little coffee shop. He, with his warm smile and nervous energy, me, buried in my books and black coffee. "Can I buy you a coffee?" he asked, flashing a bashful smile. I'm Jamie. That's how it all began. An innocent offer transforming into a beautiful journey. He proposed 2 years later, in the same coffee shop, with the same bashful smile. I said yes with tears in my eyes, and we danced under the stars, feeling like the only people in the world. However, our happiness had a shadow. Jamie's mother, Mrs. Thompson, never liked me. She was convinced I was after his money, whispering snide comments whenever she thought I couldn't hear, raising her eyebrows at our love. "I've seen your kind before, preying on unsuspecting, kind souls," she'd hiss. One day, after an awkward family dinner, I'd had enough. "Jamie," I said with more firmness than I felt, "I can't keep dealing with your mother's accusations and snide remarks." Jamie, ever the pacifist, would just sigh, saying, "She's old, set in her ways. Just ignore her." Just ignore her? I would think to myself. She's making my life miserable. But I loved Jamie too much to let his mother get in between us. So I decided to have a little fun, a little revenge to get back at her for her unjust accusations. It was time Mrs. Thompson knew she wasn't the only one who could play games. My secret, you ask? I was a self-made millionaire. A successful software engineer, I had developed a program during college, which I sold for a hefty sum. The money was in a separate account, a detail I chose not to share with Jamie or his family, wanting to be loved for who I was, not for my bank balance. So, I hatched a plan. I decided to act like the gold digger Mrs. Thompson accused me of being. I splurged on lavish gifts, extravagant holidays, and 5-star restaurants, all on Jamie's moderate salary. We were living the high life, or so it seemed. Jamie was confused but delighted, thinking we were spending my savings. Mrs. Thompson's sneers grew more pronounced, her comments more acidic. "I knew it! She's spending all your money!" she would sneer at Jamie. "You'll be left with nothing, mark my words." Jamie was bewildered, worried, but I would always reassure him, "Don't worry, I have it all under control." All the while, I secretly replaced every penny spent from my own account, ensuring Jamie's financial security was never compromised. Mrs. Thompson grew more furious, her accusations more frequent. Her suspicions were seemingly confirmed, and she was more than happy to tell the whole world about her gold-digging daughter-in-law. One day, she sat us down, her face a mask of seriousness, and said, "Jamie, I cannot sit back and watch her ruin you. I am cutting you off. You will not receive a penny more from me. Let's see how she stays with you when the money runs out." Jamie was a mix of confusion, anger, and embarrassment, his face turning various shades of red. "Mom, how can you say such things?" he stammered. "She loves me." "Oh, really?" she replied, eyebrows raised. "Let's see how long she stays when the money is gone." The stage was set. My seemingly frivolous spending continued, and Jamie's anxiety was reaching a peak. "What if we run out of money? What will we do?" He'd whisper at night, his voice laced with worry. "Trust me," I would say, squeezing his hand. "Everything will be all right." My secret was still safe, and the time to reveal it was drawing closer. Mrs. Thompson was in for the shock of her life. I could hardly wait. I spent days meticulously planning the grand reveal, my heart racing every time I thought about the look on Mrs. Thompson's face when she would find out the truth. "She thinks she can ruin my happiness?" I'd think to myself. "Let's see who has the last laugh." I went on, more audacious in my spending, more theatrical in my display of wealth. Expensive gifts for Jamie, designer dresses, and ostentatious parties. I spared no expense in portraying the image of the reckless spender, the gold digger Mrs. Thompson believed me to be. One evening, as Jamie and I hosted a lavish party, Mrs. Thompson confronted me, her face red with anger. "You are ruining my son, you worthless gold digger," she hissed, her voice quivering with rage. I smiled sweetly, responding with feigned innocence. "I'm just enjoying the wealth your son provides me. Isn't that what you've been saying all along?" The fire in her eyes intensified, but she said nothing, her lips pressed into a thin line. Poor Jamie was caught in the middle, torn between the love for his mother and his love for me. "I can't take it anymore," he confessed one night, tears streaming down his face. "I can't be in the middle, torn between the two most important women in my life." That was the turning point. Seeing him so broken, so helpless, I knew it was time to put an end to this game. "Jamie," I said, my voice soft, "it's time you knew the truth." "What truth?" he asked, wiping away his tears, his eyes red and swollen. "The truth about my wealth," I replied, reaching out to hold his hand. "I am a millionaire, Jamie. I've been replacing every penny we've spent, ensuring you never lose anything." He stared at me, disbelief etched across his face. "What? Why didn't you tell me?" "I wanted to be loved for me, not my wealth," I admitted, tears welling in my eyes. "I wanted someone who loved Emma, the person, not Emma, the millionaire." Jamie hugged me tight, whispering, "I love you, Emma, with or without your money." With Jamie now in on my secret, we decided to have one final act, the grand reveal, something Mrs. Thompson would never forget. We decided to throw a lavish banquet, inviting all our friends and family. Mrs. Thompson was, of course, the guest of honor. On the day of the banquet, the air was charged with anticipation. I wore my most extravagant dress, diamonds glittering at my throat. Jamie looked handsome in his suite, his eyes sparkling with mischief. As we stood at the podium, the room silent in anticipation, Jamie began. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have gathered you all here for a special announcement." All eyes were on us, the room buzzing with whispers. Mrs. Thompson sat in the front row, her eyes glaring daggers at me. Finally, the day of reckoning has arrived, she must have thought, believing her son was about to announce his separation from the gold digger. Taking a deep breath, I spoke up. "I have been accused of being a gold digger, of being with Jamie only for his wealth." The whispers grew louder, the air more tense. Jamie squeezed my hand, whispering, "It's time." My heart raced as I prepared to drop the bombshell, to expose my million-dollar secret to the world, to finally have my revenge on Mrs. Thompson. The air was heavy with anticipation, the silence deafening as I began to speak. "But today," I continued, my voice steady despite the racing heartbeat, "I want to reveal a truth that has been hidden since the day Jamie and I met." I could feel the air thicken with curiosity, eyes wide and expectant. "I am not the gold digger as I've been so vehemently accused of being," I stated, locking eyes with Mrs. Thompson. whose face was now a palette of confusion and surprise. "In fact," I paused, relishing the moment, "I am a self-made millionaire. My wealth exceeds that of the Thompson family." A gasp rippled through the room, a cacophony of whispers following. Mrs. Thompson's face went from red to white, shock and disbelief mingling in her eyes. "I have been playing along, acting the part of the frivolous spender, the gold digger," I continued, "because I wanted to expose the prejudice, the judgment, the condescension that came my way, primarily from Mrs. Thompson." Jamie stood by me, his hand squeezing mine, his face a mix of pride and love. He addressed the crowd. "I am ashamed that my own mother could think so lowly of the woman I love. Emma is a remarkable woman, self-made and successful, yet she chose to be with me, to share her life with me." I could see Mrs. Thompson squirming in her seat, her face a mask of humiliation and regret. I had dreamt of this moment, rehearsed it 1,000 times in my head, but the satisfaction was sweeter than I had ever imagined. This was it, I thought to myself. The truth is out, and the tables have turned. Mrs. Thompson stood up abruptly, her voice quivering. "Jamie, is this true? Emma, is this some sort of sick joke?" "No, Mother," Jamie replied sternly. "It's the truth. A truth that Emma kept hidden to protect our relationship, to protect me." "And me?" Mrs. Thompson asked, her voice breaking. "You never gave her a chance," Jamie retorted, his voice laced with disappointment. "You judged her, accused her, tried to turn me against her. Mrs. Thompson faltered, at a loss for words. The room was buzzing, a mix of shock, admiration, and curiosity. Friends and family came forward, congratulating us, expressing their astonishment at the revelation. Questions and congratulations poured in, but my eyes were on Mrs. Thompson, who sat there, her head bowed, a picture of defeat and regret. I walked over to her, my heart heavy with mixed emotions. "Mrs. Thompson," I began, my voice soft. "I never wanted to hurt you. I just wanted to be accepted for who I am, not for my wealth or lack thereof." She looked up, tears brimming in her eyes. I am sorry, Emma. I was wrong about you." Her voice broke, the words barely a whisper. It was a moment of triumph, but it was also a moment of reconciliation. I had proven my point, had my revenge, but it was time to mend fences, to build a relationship that had been tarnished by prejudice and accusations. "I hope we can start anew, Mrs. Thompson," I said, extending my hand towards her. "Not as enemies, but as family." She took my hand, her grip firm, her eyes filled with tears. "I would like that very much, Emma." The festivities continued, laughter and joy enveloping the room, but my mind was elsewhere. The revelation had sent shockwaves through the assembly, leaving a mix of admiration and awkwardness in its wake. I found myself surrounded by a throng of well-wishers, their praises and congratulations echoing in my ears. But my thoughts were with Mrs. Thompson, with the newfound truce, the possibility of a fresh start. As the night wound down, Jamie and I stole a quiet moment together, away from the prying eyes and incessant chatter. He wrapped his arms around me, his eyes searching mine. "Emma, I am so proud of you, but I can't help but feel a pang of guilt." "Guilty? Why?" I questioned, my eyebrows knitted in confusion. "I never stood up for you, never defended you against my mother's accusations. I let her tarnish your image, question your intentions," he confessed, his voice laden with remorse. "You did what you thought was right, Jamie," I reassured him, my hand gently caressing his cheek. "You tried to keep the peace, maintain a balance between the two most important women in your life. It doesn't justify my silence, my complacency," he argued, his gaze unwavering. "I should have been your pillar, your defender." You were my strength, my support, I reminded him, my voice tinged with emotion. You believed in me, trusted me, and loved me unconditionally. That's all I ever needed. He pulled me closer, his lips meeting mine in a tender kiss, a silent promise of love and commitment. But reality soon intruded, pulling us back to the whirlwind of celebrations, to the myriad questions and curious glances. How did you amass such wealth? Why did you hide your fortune? The queries were relentless, the fascination unabated. I made smart investments, I replied, maintaining a facade of nonchalance. I had the good fortune of having a sharp mind for business and finance. But why hide it? Persisted an aunt, her eyes wide with intrigue. I didn't want it to define me, I answered, my voice firm. I wanted to be loved for who I am, not for my bank balance. The respect in their eyes was evident, the admiration palpable. Mrs. Thompson, meanwhile, watched from afar, her face a canvas of conflicting emotions. I could see the regret in her eyes, the realization of her misguided judgments, her misplaced accusations. I never meant to demean her, I thought, my heart aching for the pain I had caused. I just wanted her to see me, the real me, without the shadow of wealth and privilege. As the celebrations drew to a close and the guests started to depart, a sense of tranquility settled over me. The storm had passed, leaving behind a rainbow of possibilities, a horizon of new beginnings. Mrs. Thompson approached us, her steps hesitant, her eyes moist. "Emma, Jamie, can we talk?" she requested, her voice laced with vulnerability. We sat down, the silence thick with unsaid words, unvoiced emotions. "Emma, I want to apologize," she began, her voice trembling. "I was wrong, so horribly wrong about you. I judged you, berated you, all based on my own prejudices and insecurities," she continued, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I let my fear of losing my son cloud my judgment, taint my perception. I am sorry, Emma," she apologized, her gaze locked onto mine, pleading for forgiveness. "I hope you can find it in your heart to forgive an old woman's foolishness." "I have already forgiven you, Mrs. Thompson," I replied, my hand reaching out to hold hers. "I only hope we can move past this, build a relationship based on trust and respect." "I would like that, Emma," she responded, her grip tightening on my hand. "I would like to get to know the remarkable woman my son has chosen to spend his life with." The journey had been long, the road fraught with obstacles and heartache, but the destination was worth every step, every tear. I had sought revenge, yearned for vindication, but in the end, I found something much more valuable, much more enduring: acceptance, understanding, and the promise of a new beginning. The air the next day was different, lighter, like the weight of years of misunderstandings and accusations had been lifted. The sun seemed to shine a little brighter, the birds sang a little sweeter, and the world felt anew, ripe with the promise of redemption. As Jamie and I walked through the garden, hand in hand, the atmosphere was tinged with a newfound sense of harmony, a symbiosis of souls. "Emma, do you think my mother will change?" Jamie pondered, a hint of uncertainty in his voice. "I believe people can change," I mused, my gaze fixed on the horizon, especially when they realize the error of their ways. A flicker of hope danced in Jamie's eyes, a silent prayer for reconciliation, for healing. "I hope we can become a family, a real family," he whispered, his voice tinged with longing. "I hope so too," I agreed, squeezing his hand reassuringly. "But it will take time, effort, and a lot of patience." Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. The path to reconciliation was slow, laden with hurdles and setbacks. But the commitment was unwavering, the resolve unbroken. Mrs. Thompson was genuinely trying to mend her ways, to build bridges and heal wounds. We spent more time together, learned about each other, shared stories and experiences. I saw the vulnerability behind her stern facade, the fear of loneliness, of abandonment. She saw my love for Jamie, my dreams and aspirations, the essence of who I am. "I am starting to understand why Jamie loves you so much," Mrs. Thompson confided one day, a smile playing on her lips. "You are a remarkable young woman, Emma." "And I am starting to see the loving, caring mother behind the formidable matriarch," I replied, my heart swelling with hope. There were awkward moments, uncomfortable silences, but the ice was breaking, the walls crumbling. We were learning to see each other not as adversaries, but as allies, as family. "I never thought I'd say this, but I am glad you are a part of our lives, Emma," Mrs. Thompson admitted one evening, her eyes moist with unshed tears. "I am glad to be here, to be a part of this family," I responded, a warmth spreading through my soul. Jamie watched the unfolding camaraderie with a mixture of disbelief and joy, his heart dancing to the rhythm of newfound connections, of love and acceptance. "I never thought I'd see the day when you two would sit together, laugh together," he marveled, his eyes shining with happiness. "It's a testament to the power of love, of forgiveness," I said, my hand entwined with his. "I am proud of you both," he declared, his voice thick with emotion. "You've shown me the strength of the human spirit, the capacity for change and growth." And as we sat there, under the canopy of the twinkling stars, a sense of peace enveloped us, a feeling of belonging. The journey had been tumultuous, the battles intense, but the victory was sweet, the reward priceless. I set out to teach her a lesson, to make her realize the error of her ways, I reflected, my mind wandering back to the days of pain and strife. But in the process, I learned about the power of compassion, of understanding. I wanted revenge. I wanted justice, I thought, the echoes of past animosities resonating in my soul. But I found something much more profound, much more meaningful: love, family, and the promise of a better tomorrow. I didn't just gain a husband, I gained a family, I mused, my heart brimming with gratitude. And in the process, I discovered the essence of true wealth, the richness of the human spirit. And as the curtain fell on this chapter of our lives, a new one awaited, full of possibilities and adventures, of love and laughter. The journey was just beginning, and I was ready to embrace it, to savor every moment, every emotion.
Hey friends, I've got a story that's so satisfying, it could be straight out of a movie. You know those moments in life when you feel like you've hit the jackpot of revenge? Well, this is one of those stories. Let me set the stage. My name is Martha. A few months back, my father passed away. It was a tough time for our family, but we pulled together to get through it. Dad had always been a great provider, and he left behind a sizable estate, including the family home, some investments, and a vintage car collection that would make any car enthusiast drool. Now, here's where things take a turn. My older brother, Mark, suddenly became a little too interested in Dad's assets. He'd always been the black sheep of the family, and I should have seen it coming. At the funeral, he couldn't stop talking about how he should get the lion's share because he had kids to support and bills to pay. Classic Mark. I knew something was up when he started getting chummy with Dad's lawyer, Mr. Stevens. They'd have hushed conversations at family gatherings, and it all seemed fishy. I couldn't prove anything, though, until the day of the will reading. The whole family gathered in the lawyer's office, and there was an air of tension you could cut with a knife. Mr. Stevens began to read the will, and as expected, Mark got the lion's share of the estate, including the family home. My heart sank as I thought he'd won. But then Mr. Stevens paused, looked over his glasses, and dropped the bombshell of the century. Dad's will stipulated that Mark would only get those assets if he agreed to one condition. He had to live in the family home for a year, without selling it or renting it out. If he failed to meet this condition, everything would be split equally among the rest of the family, me included. Mark's face turned a shade of crimson I didn't know existed. He spluttered, protested, and even tried to argue, but Mr. Stevens was firm. It was like something out of a legal drama. The rest of us couldn't believe our luck. So there you have it, friends. Mark's greed got the best of him, and now he's stuck in Dad's house, fuming while the rest of us get our fair share. I'm not one to revel in another's misfortune, but this time, karma delivered a dish that was too delicious to resist. Listen to my story to the end, and I'll spill the beans on how Mark's year in the family home is going. It's going to be a wild ride, and I can't wait to share it with you all. I couldn't help but smile as Mr. Stevens calmly closed the will, effectively sealing Mark's fate. It was poetic justice at its finest, and I savored the moment. Mark, on the other hand, was livid. His face turned an alarming shade of red, and he shot daggers at Mr. Stevens. "You can't be serious," Mark shouted, his voice a mixture of anger and disbelief. "This is insane, and it's not what Dad would have wanted." Mr. Stevens, ever the composed lawyer, simply shrugged. "I'm just here to execute your father's wishes, Mark. He outlined this condition in his will, and we must respect it." My other siblings and I exchanged glances, trying to contain our excitement. We had always known Mark's true colors, but this was a whole new level of karma coming back to bite him. As the will reading continued, Mr. Stevens outlined the logistics of the condition. Mark had 30 days to move into the family home, and he couldn't sell it or rent it out for a year from the date of occupancy. If he violated these terms, the assets would be divided among the remaining siblings. Mark stormed out of the lawyer's office, vowing to fight this injustice in court. He even threatened to contest the will's validity, but deep down, we knew he was cornered. Dad had been meticulous in his planning, and Mr. Stevens assured us that the will was ironclad. Over the next few weeks, Mark reluctantly moved into the family home, bitterness oozing from every pore. We all helped with the transition, making sure he had no excuses to break the conditions. It was amusing to see him try to negotiate with us for leniency, but we held firm. This was Dad's final wish, and we intended to honor it. Mark's life in the family home was far from comfortable. He resented every moment spent there, surrounded by memories of our childhood and the life he so desperately wanted to escape. I couldn't help but relish in the sweet taste of revenge as I watched him grumble and complain. But there was one thing Mark didn't anticipate: the watchful eyes of the neighborhood. Our parents had lived in that house for decades, and the neighbors were like an extended family. They knew about Dad's will and the conditions he had set for Mark. It didn't take long for them to become Mark's unofficial surveillance team. Every time he tried to bring in a realtor or put the house on the market, someone would anonymously tip us off. Mark's frustration grew with each failed attempt. It was as if the universe was conspiring against him. As the days turned into weeks, Mark's resolve began to waver. he realized that he was trapped in a situation of his own making, and no amount of tantrums or threats could change that. The house, once a symbol of his potential windfall, had become a gilded cage. Next, I will tell you into the comical mishaps and neighborhood interventions that made Mark's year in the family home even more entertaining. Stay tuned, friends. Justice is being served one day at a time. As the weeks turned into months, Mark's predicament in the family home only grew more comical and bizarre, like a real-life sitcom unfolding before our eyes. It was a twisted form of poetic justice that I couldn't help but relish, given what he had put our family through. After all, he had unscrupulously seized our rightful inheritance, and now he was paying the price, quite literally, for his avarice and deceit. One of the most entertaining aspects of this entire ordeal was witnessing Mark's desperate attempts to maintain some semblance of his old life within the confines of the family home. You see, he had been a big shot in his upscale condo, living a life of opulence with a personal chef, a housekeeper, and a gardener to cater to his every whim. However, in the family home, he had to fend for himself, and the results were nothing short of comedic brilliance. I still vividly remember the time he tried to cook a meal for himself. It was an epic disaster of monumental proportions, a culinary catastrophe that would be legendary in family lore. Smoke billowed from the kitchen, and the shrill blaring of the fire alarm reverberated through the house as he desperately tried to salvage his burnt creation. We, the rightful heirs who had suffered his greed, rushed over, fearing for the safety of the house. Instead, we found Mark, frantically waving a dish towel in front of the alarm, his face smudged with soot, and his once impeccable chef's apron now a grimy, scorched rag. "You guys never had to deal with this," he yelled, pointing accusatory fingers at us, as if we were to blame for his culinary calamity. "I can't believe Dad's doing this to me." We couldn't help but chuckle at his culinary misadventure. It was a stark reminder that Mark was completely out of his element in the family home. His lavish lifestyle, which he had flaunted so shamelessly, had left him ill-prepared for the simple realities of everyday living that the rest of us had long since mastered. But the most satisfying moments of all were when the neighborhood, our silent allies, came to our aid. They had taken it upon themselves to enforce Dad's unorthodox conditions, ensuring that Mark didn't dare to try and circumvent them. If he so much as contemplated putting the house on the market, the local real estate agents would be discreetly informed about the will's ironclad stipulations. Once, Mark attempted to rent out a room in the house, perhaps thinking it would bring in some much-needed income. However, little did he know that one of the vigilant neighbors had assumed the role of a potential tenant, engaging in a charade that almost felt like an episode of a hidden camera prank show. At the very last moment, just as Mark was ready to seal the deal, the neighbor revealed the truth, leaving Mark flustered and fuming. His frustration knew no bounds, and we reveled in his exasperation. As the months dragged on, Mark's relationship with the neighborhood soured further. He had unwittingly become the pariah of the community, and people avoided him like the plague. His desperate attempts to garner sympathy from the very people he had once ignored or treated with disdain were met with icy indifference. It was poetic justice at its finest, a symphony of retribution conducted by the universe itself. Mark had grievously underestimated the power of unity within a close-knit neighborhood, and it had become his undoing. The collective strength of the community was a force to be reckoned with, and Mark was discovering this firsthand. But there was still one final twist in this tale of revenge, a revelation that left us all dumbfounded. Next, I will tell you how Mark's tumultuous year in the family home took an unexpected turn, shaking the very foundations of our family's legacy. Stay with me, friends, because this story is about to get even juicier. As the seasons changed and a year passed since Dad's funeral, the drama surrounding Mark's residency in the family home took an unexpected turn. It was as if fate had decided to add one final twist to this bizarre tale of revenge, and it left us all in a state of bewilderment. You see, despite the absurd conditions laid out in Dad's will, Mark had managed to hold on to the family home for an entire year. He had endured the comedic mishaps, the neighborhood's vigilant surveillance, and the utter isolation he had brought upon himself. But he was unyielding in his determination to cling to the house, convinced that he would outlast the stipulations of the will. However, Mark had overlooked a crucial detail, one that would prove to be his downfall. The family home was an aging structure, and its maintenance required not only financial resources, but also a deep understanding of its quirks and idiosyncrasies. Mark possessed neither. At first, we noticed minor issues: a leaky roof, a malfunctioning furnace, and creaking floorboards. Mark, in his arrogance, believed he could simply hire contractors to address these problems. But what he failed to realize was that the house had a peculiar temperament, and it seemed to rebel against his presence. The leaky roof became an incessant drip, defying all attempts at repair. The furnace emitted eerie, discordant noises that kept Mark awake at night, and the creaking floorboards seemed to whisper haunting secrets. It was as if the house itself had joined the neighborhood in its silent revolt against its unwelcome occupant. Mark's frustration grew day by day. He hired a slew of contractors, each more bewildered than the last by the house's bizarre behavior. Plumbers scratched their heads as pipes seemed to change course at will. Electricians were confounded by switches that operated in reverse, and carpenters found themselves entangled in a maze of hidden passages behind walls. His financial resources began to dwindle as he poured money into futile attempts to tame the rebellious house. The neighborhood, well aware of his predicament, watched with a mixture of amusement and satisfaction. It was as if the house itself had become an active participant in our quest for revenge. Mark's sleepless nights and growing desperation were a source of dark amusement for us. He would often emerge from the house in disheveled attire, hair askew, and eyes bloodshot from lack of rest. His once confident demeanor had crumbled, replaced by a haunted look that mirrored the house's own peculiar personality. But it was during a stormy night that the house unleashed its most spectacular display of defiance. As thunder rumbled and rain lashed against the windows, Mark was jolted awake by a cacophony of crashing and banging. He stumbled through the darkened corridors, his flashlight barely penetrating the gloom. What he discovered was a scene straight out of a horror movie. Furniture levitated, seemingly of its own volition, and household objects danced through the air. The walls vibrated with an otherworldly energy, and the very foundation of the house trembled. It was as if the house had awakened its dormant spirits to expel the intruder. Mark fled the house in terror, leaving behind his belongings and his illusions of conquest. As he stood in the pouring rain, drenched and defeated, the neighborhood watched in eerie silence. The house had made its final verdict, and Mark had been judged unworthy. In the aftermath of this supernatural spectacle, Mark decided he had had enough. He relinquished his claim to the family home, realizing that some forces were beyond human comprehension. The house, it seemed, had exacted its revenge in the most enigmatic and poetic manner. And so, friends, our family home returned to us, no longer tainted by Mark's presence. The neighborhood, our steadfast allies, rejoiced in silence, knowing that justice had been served. Mark, once a symbol of greed and betrayal, faded into obscurity. But the tale doesn't end here. Next, I'll share the ultimate twist in this saga, an unexpected discovery that shed light on Dad's true intentions and left us with a newfound appreciation for the eccentricities of our family home. Stay tuned for the grand finale. As the dust settled on Mark's hasty departure from our family home, we thought the tale had reached its conclusion. The house, having successfully defended itself against the invader, returned to its serene, if slightly quirky, state. The neighborhood, once rife with intrigue and espionage, resumed its usual rhythms, and life appeared to return to normal. But as fate would have it, the final act of this peculiar drama was still waiting in the wings. It was a revelation that would not only astonish us, but also provide closure to the enigmatic legacy our father had left behind. In the days following Mark's departure, I began the arduous task of sorting through the accumulated detritus he had left behind. It was a Herculean effort, as he had seemingly abandoned most of his possessions in his panicked flight from the house. Among the discarded items, I stumbled upon an old leather-bound journal, weathered by time and neglect. Curiosity piqued, I opened the journal to find the handwritten entries of our father, dating back several decades. It was a chronicle of his thoughts, dreams, and aspirations, a glimpse into the mind of a man who had always been somewhat of an enigma to us. As I read through the pages, a pattern began to emerge. Our father's writing spoke of his love for the family home, his fascination with its idiosyncrasies, and his deep connection to the neighborhood. It was clear that the house held a special place in his heart, and he had dedicated years to understanding its mysteries. But the most astonishing revelation came when I reached the final entries of the journal. In those pages, our father had detailed a plan that would ultimately lead to Mark's downfall and the house's triumphant defense. He had orchestrated the entire series of events, from the eccentric will to the house's rebellious antics. It was all part of his grand scheme to ensure that the family home remained untouched by those who did not truly appreciate its quirks. In his own words, he had written, "Only those who understand the heart of this house deserve to inherit it. I will test them as the house has tested me." It was a revelation that left me both astounded and moved. Our father had devised this elaborate ruse, not out of malice, but out of love for the house he had called home for so many years. He had used his eccentricity and flair for the dramatic to protect the place he held dear. And so, friends, the story comes to a close with a newfound appreciation for our father's legacy. The house, once a symbol of revenge, now stood as a testament to his love and ingenuity. Mark's brief tenure had inadvertently become a test of character, and he had failed spectacularly. As for us, we continued to live in the house, embracing its quirks and mysteries with open hearts. It was a daily reminder of our father's eccentricity and his deep affection for the place he had called home. The neighborhood, once divided by suspicion, had come together in a shared understanding of the house's unique magic. In the end, it was a tale of revenge turned redemption, of a house that defended itself, and of a father's enduring love. And as I write these final words, I can't help but smile, knowing that our family home will continue to enchant and confound generations to come. Thank you for joining me on this extraordinary journey, friends. And remember, sometimes the most unusual stories hold the deepest truths.
Hey there, friends. Strap in, 'cause I've got a tale that'll make your jaw drop. We've all been through those moments when our gut tells us something's off and curiosity gets the best of us. Well, this is one of those stories, but trust me, it's a roller coaster of emotions. So, there's me, living a seemingly happy life with my hubby, Daniel. We had been married for 5 years, and everything felt peachy until it didn't. You see, Daniel had been working a high-stress job at some fancy corporate office. He'd often come home late, worn out, and claimed it was the workload. I thought it was the classic workaholic spiel, and I was understanding. I mean, love and support, right? One evening, though, something changed. I was looking for my lost phone, and what do I find? A stack of letters tucked away in the back of his desk drawer, each addressed to him from a mysterious sender with no return address. They looked old, and their edges were frayed, as if someone had read them over and over again. Naturally, I started wondering, who is this secret pen pal of my husband's? Why are these letters hidden away? And the biggest question of all, why hadn't he mentioned them to me? I couldn't resist the urge to open one of the letters. Call me nosy, but these secrets were gnawing at my sanity. So I delicately slid a letter from its envelope and began to read, my heart pounding. The letter was from a woman named Lily, and she poured her heart out about missing Daniel terribly. She mentioned memories they had shared, moments of passion, and their dreams of a future together. It was a love letter, no doubt. But wait, it got worse. Lily signed off as "Your forever love." My stomach did somersaults. Your forever love? What kind of melodramatic nonsense was this? And why did it sound so personal? I thought of Daniel, who was in the next room, probably wrapping up another late night at the office. My mind raced with questions, and as I read more letters, the reality began to sink in. What the heck was my husband hiding, and how long had he been hiding it? It was time to put on my detective hat and get to the bottom of this mess. All right, folks, thanks for sticking around. When we last left off, I had discovered those mysterious letters tucked away in Daniel's desk. Now, I'm about to dive deeper into this web of secrets and lies. Buckle up. The letters from Lily shook me to my core, but I needed more concrete evidence. So, what's a determined wife to do? Well, I knew I had to confront Daniel, but I had to be smart about it. After all, this was a man who'd managed to hide these letters for who knows how long. The next day, I decided to drop a little hint. I casually mentioned to him that I had found some old love letters from an ex-boyfriend while cleaning the attic. I watched his reaction like a hawk, but all I got was an awkward chuckle and a dismissive, "Oh, really? You should throw them away." It wasn't the reaction I had hoped for, but it was something. I knew I needed to dig deeper. So I embarked on my little mission, which included late-night snooping, phone checking, I know, but desperate times, and even following him a couple of times. One evening, he said he had to go to the office for an emergency. Red flags waving, right? So guess what? I decided to tail him, just like in those cheesy spy movies. I parked my car a few blocks away from his office building and watched as he entered the seemingly empty office. My heart pounding, I waited for a while, then stealthily made my way to the building. I used my best ninja moves to sneak in, and lo and behold, I heard hushed voices coming from his office. Sneaking closer, I peeked through the frosted glass window and saw him, Daniel, talking to a woman, the mysterious Lily herself. My heart felt like it was going to leap out of my chest. They were too engrossed in their conversation to notice me. I couldn't hear everything, but their body language said it all. It was intimate, and my blood boiled. I snapped a quick picture with my phone as evidence, my hands trembling like crazy. I had proof now, but I needed to play this smart. I slinked away from the scene, my mind racing. Revenge was coming, but it had to be perfect. I spent the next few days gathering more information, and what I uncovered was mind-boggling. It seemed like Daniel and Lily had been involved for years, even before we got married. My world shattered as I realized the extent of his betrayal. But here's the twist, friends. I wasn't about to let this betrayal break me. Nope, I had a plan, and it was deliciously wicked. Okay, the plot was thickening, and it was time for yours truly to unleash Operation Sabotage. Revenge was a dish best served cold, right? First, I needed to gather more information about Lily, the mysterious woman who had been tearing my world apart. I did some online sleuthing. Thank you, Internet, and found out she worked at a nearby marketing agency. Armed with this knowledge, I made a cunning plan. I dressed up like a corporate spy, complete with oversized sunglasses and a trench coat. Yes, I went full-on undercover mode. I strolled into her office building and did my best impression of a lost tourist, asking the receptionist for directions to her office. With her help, I made it to Lily's floor, where her colleagues thought I was some new big-shot client. I finally spotted her office, discreetly checked her nameplate, and snapped a quick picture. Score. I had her full name now, Lily Walker. Armed with this newfound knowledge, I retreated from the scene, feeling like James Bond's long-lost cousin. Next stop, social media. I stalked her profiles like it was my job, and guess what I found? Her upcoming high school reunion. I concocted a brilliant plan. I created a fake Facebook profile, pretending to be a fellow high school alumnus, and requested to join the reunion group. I spent hours crafting my backstory and building my character. I even photoshopped a vintage yearbook photo to match the others. Nailed it. Once inside the group, I started planting seeds of doubt. I posted cryptic messages about how some people never change and dropped hints about secrets from the past. The buzz started growing, and people began whispering about old scandals. But I wasn't done yet. I messaged Lily privately, pretending to be a concerned classmate who had heard rumors about her affair with a married man. Oh boy, she took the bait. She replied, all flustered and defensive, denying everything. But her reaction told me everything I needed to know. I knew I had her right where I wanted her, panicked and paranoid. My plan was working like a charm, and I couldn't help but feel a twinge of satisfaction. But revenge is a dish best served with a side of patience, my friends. I was just getting started. So, Lily was starting to feel the heat. She was on edge, constantly glancing over her shoulder at the reunion, wondering who was stirring the pot. Her perfect little world was unraveling, and I was here for every delicious moment. The reunion was just around the corner, and I knew I had to turn up the heat. I reached out to some of my real high school friends and filled them in on my plan. They were all too eager to help bring Lily down a notch, considering what she'd done to me. We decided to create a fake, scandalous story about Lily and an anonymous, well-known figure, adding just enough details to make it believable. We crafted a narrative that would send shockwaves through the reunion. Lily was about to become the talk of the town. I posed as an anonymous tipster and sent this juicy piece of gossip to a local gossip blog. You know the type, always hungry for the next big scoop. The story spread like wildfire, and before long, Everyone in our hometown was buzzing about it. The reunion arrived, and the tension was palpable. People were whispering, exchanging knowing glances, and Lily was clearly rattled. She tried to put on a brave face, but I could see the cracks in her composure. Revenge had never tasted so sweet. As the night wore on, the fake story continued to circulate. People approached Lily, asking her about the scandalous affair. She vehemently denied it, of course, but doubt had already taken root in people's minds. Her reputation was in shambles, and I couldn't help but relish in her misery. But I wasn't finished. I had one more ace up my sleeve. I knew Lily's weakness, her vanity. She prided herself on her appearance and reputation, and I was about to exploit that. I arranged for a friend to accidentally spill a glass of red wine on her pristine white dress. The gasps and whispers that followed were music to my ears. Lily was mortified, her face a mask of humiliation. With my plan in full swing, I retreated from the chaos I'd created, satisfied that my revenge was hitting its mark. But there was still more to come, dear friends. As the reunion unfolded, the tension was electric. Lily was caught in a web of deceit, and I was the puppeteer pulling the strings. But there was one finale act left to stage. I watched from the shadows as Lily struggled to salvage her reputation. The scandalous affair story had spread like wildfire, and no amount of denial could extinguish the flames. She was cornered, desperate, and on the verge of unraveling completely. Then came my pièce de résistance. I had convinced my friend, Sarah, to approach Lily with a proposition, an opportunity to clear her name. Sarah posed as a well-connected figure in town, offering to help Lily expose the anonymous tipster behind the scandal. It was an offer too tempting for Lily to resist. The plan was simple, yet brilliant. We would lure Lily into a trap of her own making. Sarah promised to meet Lily in a secluded part of the reunion venue, away from prying eyes. Lily, desperate for redemption, took the bait. As they met in the dimly lit corner, I watched from a distance, my heart pounding with anticipation. Sarah, with a sly grin, told Lily that she had uncovered the identity of the tipster. Lily leaned in, eager to hear the name, her face a mixture of hope and dread. And then the bombshell dropped. "It's Karen," Sarah said with a wicked smile. "Your little sister." Lily's eyes widened in shock, and she stumbled back as if struck by lightning. Her world came crashing down around her, and she realized the depths of her own downfall. She had been played like a fiddle, and I reveled in the sweet taste of victory. But that wasn't the end of it. As Lily tried to process the revelation, I stepped out of the shadows, finally revealing myself. The look on her face was a priceless blend of horror and realization. "You!" she stammered, her voice trembling. "It was you all along?" I nodded, relishing the moment. "Surprised, Lily? You underestimated me, just like you always did. But it's time you faced the consequences of your actions." The reunion attendees, drawn by the commotion, gathered around, witnessing the unmasking of the devious mastermind behind the scandal. Lily's humiliation was complete. As the truth sunk in, Lily was left humbled and defeated. Her carefully constructed world had crumbled, and there was no escaping the consequences of her deceit. Revenge had been served, and it was a dish best served cold. So, dear friends, that's the climax of my story, the moment when Lily's reign of terror came crashing down, but there's still an epilogue left to tell. After the dramatic unmasking at our high school reunion, I watched Lily's life spiral into chaos. The fallout was intense, to say the least. Friends distanced themselves from her, and her reputation lay in tatters. Her affair with my ex-husband was now public knowledge, and the scandal became the talk of the town. But this wasn't just about exposing her secrets. It was about teaching her a lesson. Lily had underestimated me for far too long, and it was time she learned that her actions had consequences. Lily's marriage to my ex, Daniel, crumbled under the weight of the affair. He couldn't bear the shame and guilt, and their relationship imploded. He moved out of town, leaving Lily alone to deal with the wreckage of her life. Meanwhile, I had found unexpected solace in my newfound friendships at the reunion. People who had once been mere acquaintances became my confidants. We laughed together, reminisced about old times, and bonded over shared experiences. I realized that I wasn't alone in this journey. I had a support system that cared about me. As for Daniel, well, he had learned a harsh lesson about the consequences of his actions. His relationship with Lily had fallen apart, and he was left to pick up the pieces of his own life. He tried to reach out to me, but I had no interest in rekindling our past. My focus was on healing and moving forward. In the midst of all this chaos, I received an unexpected message from an unlikely source. My sister, Susan. She had witnessed the unraveling of Lily's life and reached out to me, seeking forgiveness and reconciliation. She had seen the error of her ways and wanted to make amends. Susan, always the more emotionally expressive of the two, rebelled against the injustice of it all. She channeled her grief and anger into defiance, often pushing boundaries and challenging authority figures. I, on the other hand, internalized my pain, choosing to retreat into the comforting embrace of solitude and silence. Our coping mechanisms diverged, and the gap between us grew wider. As we entered our teenage years, our paths seemed to diverge even further. Susan's rebellious streak intensified, leading to strained relationships with our grandparents. She started dyeing her hair vibrant shades, hanging out with what our grandparents deemed the wrong crowd, and engaging in minor delinquencies that left them exasperated. I, however, took the opposite route, seeking solace in academics and extracurricular activities. I aimed for excellence in everything I pursued, driven by the desire to make our parents proud, even if they could no longer witness my achievements. The strain between us peaked when Susan dropped out of high school, a decision that caused a rift between her and our grandparents. While she asserted her newfound independence, I continued to pursue my studies diligently, determined to secure a brighter future for myself. When Susan left home, the divide between us felt insurmountable. We became estranged, communicating only through sporadic and terse messages. Our family bonds weakened, and it seemed like Susan had embarked on a path of self-destruction while I sought stability and fulfillment. Part of me was wary, remembering the years of hurt she had caused, but another part saw the opportunity for healing and redemption. We met cautiously, and Susan poured out her remorse and regret. It was a heartfelt conversation, one that allowed us to bridge the chasm that had separated us for so long. I learned that Susan had faced her own share of struggles and hardships in the wake of our estrangement. She had hit rock bottom, but it had been the catalyst for her transformation. She had turned her life around, found stability, and wanted a chance to rebuild our sisterly bond. It wasn't an easy decision, but I chose to forgive her. I realized that holding on to anger and resentment wouldn't bring me peace. Instead, I embraced the opportunity to mend our relationship, and it was a choice that brought unexpected joy. So, friends, that's where we stand today. Lily's empire had crumbled, Daniel had faced his reckoning, and my sister and I had embarked on a journey of reconciliation. Revenge had led to redemption, and I had found strength in forgiveness. In the aftermath of the high school reunion and the chaos that ensued, I found myself reflecting on the journey that had led me here. My quest for revenge had uncovered secrets, shattered illusions, and exposed the true nature of those around me. But more importantly, it had transformed me. I had always been the quiet, reserved one, the peacemaker, if you will. But life had a way of teaching me that sometimes you need to fight for yourself, to stand up against those who seek to hurt you. My journey had been a crash course in resilience and self-discovery. Lily, once the queen bee of our high school, had lost her crown and found herself isolated. She faced the consequences of her actions and the judgment of those she had wronged. It was a humbling experience for her, and while I didn't revel in her suffering, I couldn't deny that a sense of justice had been served. As for Daniel, he had learned that taking shortcuts and betraying trust would only lead to his downfall. His reckless pursuit of his desires had cost him dearly, and he was left to rebuild his life from the ruins of his mistakes. My sister Susan's transformation was perhaps the most unexpected turn of events. Her journey from a troubled past to seeking redemption had touched my heart. We had rebuilt our sisterly bond, and while it wasn't without its challenges, forgiveness had allowed us to heal and move forward together. I also found solace in the friends I had reconnected with at the reunion. They had been my pillars of support during these tumultuous times, and I was grateful for their presence in my life. We shared laughter, tears, and stories of our shared past, reminding me that I was never truly alone. So, what did I learn from this whirlwind of events? Revenge may have been my initial motivation, but it had ultimately led me to a different destination, one of self-discovery and growth. I had rediscovered my strength and resilience, and I had learned the power of forgiveness and redemption. Life had a way of teaching us lessons, often in unexpected ways. It had shown me that we all make mistakes, but it's how we choose to respond and grow from them that defines us. Revenge may have been a fleeting desire, but redemption and forgiveness were the true keys to finding peace and happiness. As I stand here today, surrounded by the love of those who truly care about me, I can't help but feel grateful for this incredible journey. The scars of the past have healed, and I look forward to what the future holds. Thank you, friends, for joining me on this roller coaster of a story. It's been an honor sharing this tale with you. Remember, life's challenges may test us, but our choices and resilience can lead us to unexpected places. Embrace the journey, and may your path be one of redemption and happiness.
I'm Lila. My life was straightforward, just work and home. I worked as a web designer, and my days were filled with coding, designing, and client meetings, all from the comfort of my home. I was good at what I did, and it showed in my bank balance. It wasn't always like this. A year ago, my life was a mess after a horrible breakup. I had sworn off relationships, focusing only on work. But then, I met Ethan at a friend's party. Ethan came up to me with a simple, "Hi, I'm Ethan. You're Lila, right?" His voice was calm and steady, no airs, no pretense. "Yes, that's me," I replied, taking in his casual attire and easygoing smile. We talked about everything that evening, from movies to our hobbies. He mentioned he worked in sales and seemed to enjoy his job. "You must love what you do," he commented after I explained my work. "I do," I smiled. "It's more than just a job for me." He nodded, and we continued chatting for what felt like hours. By the end of the evening, we had exchanged numbers. It wasn't long before our casual chats turned into dates, and our dates turned into serious discussions about our future together. Ethan was different from the men I'd known. He was kind, attentive, and seemed genuinely interested in my life. I remember our third date distinctly. We were sitting in a small cafe, and he handed me a bouquet of flowers. "For you," he said simply. "Oh, Ethan, they're lovely," I replied, taken aback by the gesture. "I thought they'd make you smile," he grinned. We dated for a few months, and everything felt perfect. So when Ethan proposed, I didn't hesitate. We had a simple wedding and moved in together. My house, spacious and filled with the memories of my single life, now echoed with our shared laughter. However, things took a turn when Ethan came home one day looking distressed. "I lost my job, Lila," he began, avoiding my gaze. I was stunned, but tried to be understanding. "It's okay, Ethan. We'll manage. You'll find another job soon." He looked relieved. "Thank you for understanding. I promise I'll make this right." I believed him. Truly I did. But as days turned into weeks and weeks into months, with Ethan not working and his job interviews leading nowhere, my patience began to wear thin. As the days went by, my trust in Ethan waned, replaced by an unsettling anxiety. Our financial situation was still stable thanks to my job, but Ethan's attitude towards employment became increasingly lackadaisical. One evening, I overheard him talking on the phone. "Yes, Mom, I'm taking care of everything. Lila's just doing her little web designing thing, but I'm handling the big stuff." That conversation irked me. Was he implying that he was the primary earner? A week later, his sister Elsie dropped by for a visit. She and I never really got along. Our beliefs and lifestyles were polar opposites. She had chosen a life completely centered around her home and husband, a choice I respected but couldn't understand. The moment she walked in, she started inspecting the place. "Lila, don't you ever dust around here?" she commented, running her finger along a shelf. "We've both been busy, Elsie," I said, trying to remain calm. She smirked. "Well, maybe if you focused less on work and more on your home." "Elsie, Lila's doing a lot, okay? You don't need to come here and criticize." Ethan quickly interjected, trying to mediate. Elsie raised an eyebrow. "Oh, I know you're taking care of everything, Ethan. I just feel bad you married someone who can't even keep a house tidy." I was fuming. "Elsie, it's not just my job to keep the house clean. Ethan lives here too." Ethan glanced at me, then at his sister, a silent plea in his eyes. "Let's not discuss this here," he said softly. Elsie smirked. Of course, wouldn't want to make things uncomfortable. But remember, Ethan, a man's role is to provide. I was left seething as Elsie sauntered out, leaving a trail of tension in her wake. Later that evening, I tried talking to Ethan. "Why does Elsie think you're the main provider? Why is she under the impression that I'm just sitting around doing nothing?" Ethan looked uncomfortable. "Look, Lila, I might have mentioned to her that I'm handling a lot of things. I didn't want her or Mom thinking less of me because I'm not working." "That doesn't give you the right to belittle my contribution, Ethan. We're supposed to be a team," I replied, frustration evident in my voice. Ethan sighed. "I'm sorry, Lila. I'll clear things up with Elsie and Mom. Please give me some time." The days that followed were full of tension. Every morning, as I settled into my home office, the same nagging thought kept bothering me. Was Ethan being truthful? How much more was he keeping from me? It was one evening, as I sat down to pay some bills, that I noticed something off. A hefty amount had been transferred monthly from our joint account to an unfamiliar one. Curiosity piqued, I decided to dig deeper. I approached Ethan as he lounged on the couch. "Hey, I noticed some transfers from our account. Do you know anything about it?" Ethan looked up, startled. "Oh, yeah. That's just some money I've been sending to Mom to help her out." I raised an eyebrow. "Help her out? With what? And why didn't you tell me?" He hesitated. "Well, she has some expenses, and since I'm not working, I thought I'd support her with our savings." I was taken aback. "Ethan, that's our money. We should be discussing these things together. It's a considerable amount." Ethan looked away. "I didn't think it was a big deal, Lila. She's family." Frustration bubbled up. "But so am I. Why didn't you talk to me about this?" I didn't want you to worry," he muttered. My voice began to tremble with anger. "Ethan, keeping secrets, especially about money, isn't right. We made a commitment to each other. This isn't how it's supposed to work." He sighed. "I know, Lila. I didn't want to feel useless. I wanted to at least do something for my family since I can't for ours right now." I looked at him, tears in my eyes. "But you are doing something. You're sharing your life with me. We need trust and transparency. Without that, what do we have?" Ethan lowered his gaze. "I'm sorry, Lila. I messed up." I took a deep breath. "We need to fix this, Ethan, starting with being honest about everything." He nodded, looking genuinely remorseful. "I promise, no more secrets." But as the night wore on and I lay in bed, I couldn't shake off the feeling of betrayal. In the wake of our last conversation, things felt even more strained between Ethan and me. Though he promised transparency, my own curiosity led me on a path to uncover the depth of his deception. One evening, as Ethan went out under the guise of another job seminar, I decided to do a little detective work. Going through our financial statements, I traced back every transaction to his mother's account. The sums were large, far more than one would need for general assistance. I picked up my phone and called my friend Jane, who worked at a bank. "Hey Jane, I need a favor," I began, hesitating. "Can you help me look into an account? I think something's off." There was a pause on the other line before Jane replied, "Lila, you know that's not exactly legal." "I know, but I'm desperate," I admitted. "I promise, I won't get you in trouble." After hearing my story, Jane hesitated for a moment and then said, "Okay, send me the account number. I'll see what I can do." A day later, she called me back with information that confirmed my suspicions. "Lila," Jane began, her voice low, "the money Ethan's sending to his mother? It's not just sitting there. It's being funneled into an investment account, and the amounts are substantial." My heart sank. "Investment account?" "Yes, and the worst part is, it's under both his mother's and his name." I was speechless. Not only was he giving away our savings, but he was also making investments without informing me. "Jane, thank you," I managed, my voice breaking. "I'm so sorry, Lila," she replied. I sat in our living room, the weight of betrayal pressing down on me. How could he? When Ethan returned later that evening, I confronted him, papers scattered all over our coffee table. "Ethan, we need to talk." He took one look at the bank statements and paled. "Lila?" "Why, Ethan, why did you lie to me?" I demanded. Ethan swallowed hard. Mom convinced me it was a good investment. She said we'd double our money in no time. I thought I was doing it for us." "But it's our money, Ethan," I exclaimed. "You can't make decisions like this on your own. We're supposed to be partners." He sat down, defeated. "I know. I messed up. I thought I could surprise you, show you I was contributing." I shook my head, tears streaming down my face. By lying? By betraying my trust? Ethan looked away, guilt evident in his eyes. "I'm sorry, Lila. I should have talked to you." The truth was out, but the damage was done. Could our relationship withstand the strain of so many lies? The atmosphere in the house was as cold and quiet as a winter morning. After uncovering Ethan's deceit, I was determined to keep my composure, but I found myself rattled whenever I remembered the mistruths. Ethan, on the other hand, seemed to be avoiding the topic entirely. Just as I sat down at my computer, the front door burst open. Before I could react, Lydia, Ethan's mother, and Elsie stormed into the living room. "You shameless woman!" Lydia's voice cut through the air. "All you do is sit on your behind and suck the life out of my son." Elsie chimed in with a smirk. "Always knew you were a leech, just waiting to latch on to someone better off." I took a deep breath, gathering my thoughts before replying. "I'm the one working and earning here. Ethan hasn't been for months." Ethan stood off to the side, his eyes darting between us. I hoped, expected, that he would say something, defend me. But he remained silent. Lydia, her face red with rage, took a step forward. "You expect us to believe that? My son has been the one supporting this family. You've just been enjoying his hard work." Elsie nodded in agreement. "Honestly, I don't know what he saw in you. You're just a lazy housewife, living off someone else's money." Their words were like salt on an open wound. But more painful than their false accusations was Ethan's silence. He just stood there, watching the scene unfold without uttering a word in my defense. Taking a deep breath, I stood tall and looked straight into Lydia's eyes. "All I ask is for the money Ethan transferred to you, returned. It's rightfully ours, not just his." Lydia's face twisted in rage. "How dare you? That's my son's money, and I'll decide what to do with it." Despite the fury in her eyes, I didn't waver. "It's our money, Lydia. Earned by me, not him." She stared at me for a moment, the room silent except for our heavy breathing. Then, with a huff, she turned on her heel, Elsie following close behind. "This isn't over," Lydia spat as she stormed out of the house. The door slammed shut behind them, leaving a lingering echo. I turned to Ethan, waiting for him to say something, anything. But he just looked down, avoiding my gaze. The gravity of the situation weighed heavily on me. Not only was there deceit about money, but I was also fighting a battle with his family on my own. His silence hurt more than any deceit ever could. A few days after the confrontation, I sat in my home office, distracted by everything that had occurred. The tranquility of my workspace, usually a haven for creativity, now felt stifling. Taking a sip from my coffee, I pondered on how to reclaim my dignity and pride. The first step was clear. I accessed my online bank, scrutinizing every transaction, noting down each suspicious transfer. The amount Ethan had funneled to his mother was staggering. Money I had earned with sweat and sleepless nights, taken without my knowledge. A message pinged on my computer. It was from Lucy, a friend since college, and also a brilliant lawyer. I had confided in her about the whole situation, and she was eager to help. "Hey, I've looked into your situation. Let's meet for lunch?" her message read. We met at a quiet bistro, away from prying eyes. "So," Lucy began, stirring her iced tea, "I've been doing some digging, and I think we have a solid case here. It's about time we put Ethan and his family in their place." I nodded, taking a deep breath. "I just want what's rightfully mine, Lucy. I can't let them get away with this." Lucy's eyes gleamed with determination. "Trust me, they won't." Weeks turned into a whirlwind of paperwork, meetings, and strategy sessions. Lucy and I, along with a team she'd put together, found evidence not only of Ethan's deceit, but also questionable transactions involving Lydia's accounts. It was a spiderweb of lies and deceit, with Ethan and Lydia at its center. One evening, after another exhaustive session, Lucy looked at me and said, "It's time. Let's serve them the papers." The next morning, Lucy and I drove to Lydia's place. Ethan's car was parked outside. Perfect. We rang the bell, and Elsie answered, her face a mask of fake surprise. "Oh, it's you," she sneered. "We're not here for games," I said coldly. "Is Ethan here?" Before Elsie could reply, Ethan emerged from the living room. His confident smirk vanished as Lucy handed him an envelope. "You're being sued," she said crisply. "For fraud and theft. I'd advise you to get a lawyer." His face paled. "This is ridiculous," he exclaimed. "No, what's ridiculous is you stealing from your wife and lying about it," I retorted. Lydia appeared at the door, her eyes scanning the scene. "What's going on here?" "You might want to read this too," Lucy said, handing her another envelope. As Lydia read the documents, her face went from smug to horrified. "You can't do this." I stood tall, all the pain and humiliation fueling my resolve. "I can, and I am. See you in court." Walking away from that house, with Lucy by my side, I felt a weight lifted. It wasn't about revenge. It was about justice. It was about standing up for myself when others tried to push me down. It was about reclaiming my power. And it was served cold. As the days drew closer to our court date, I braced myself for the inevitable backlash. I knew Lydia and Ethan wouldn't go down without a fight. And while I was emotionally ready, I didn't expect them to bring the battle right to my doorstep. It was a chilly evening when my doorbell rang. Peering through the peephole, I saw them, Lydia, Elsie, and Ethan, their faces a cocktail of anger and determination. Taking a deep breath, I opened the door. "Thought you'd ambush us with that lawsuit, did you?" Lydia spat out, taking a step inside. Ethan and Elsie trailed behind her, blocking the exit. "Calm down, Lydia. This isn't a good look for you," I replied evenly. "You think you can just humiliate us in public? Drag our name through the mud?" Elsie snapped, her voice dripping with contempt. "It's simple," I replied coolly. "Return the money, and this ends." Ethan, who had been silent till now, looked at me with a mix of frustration and sadness. "Is this how you want things to end? By suing your own family?" "Family?" I echoed, my voice icy. "A family doesn't steal from each other. A family doesn't lie and degrade one another." He sighed. "I made a mistake, but taking us to court? That's extreme." "It's justice," I responded, "and I'm not dropping the case." Lydia, crimson with rage, glared at me. "We won't let you tarnish our reputation. You're going to regret this." "Is that a threat?" I countered. "Everything I've done is legal. Can you say the same?" "Enough!" Ethan shouted. "This is getting us nowhere." I fixed him with a steely gaze. "You're right. It's clear where we all stand. Now, I suggest you leave." Elsie sneered. "You may have gotten the upper hand now, but remember, the courts haven't decided anything yet." "We'll see," I replied confidently. As they left, the tension in the room was palpable, but I stood my ground. They had come to intimidate, to make me doubt my course. But it had the opposite effect. Their visit only solidified my decision. There was no turning back now, and whatever the outcome, I was ready. The day of the court hearing arrived quicker than I anticipated. As I entered the building, my heels clicked sharply against the marble floor, echoing the resolute beat of my heart. There was a thrum of anticipation in the air, and I could feel eyes on me, but I remained focused, my gaze unwavering. Sitting across the room, Lydia, Elsie, and Ethan whispered among themselves, casting furtive glances in my direction. Ethan looked especially worn out, his earlier confidence replaced by clear anxiety. Lydia, on the other hand, wore a mask of defiance, while Elsie's face was set in a frown, her eyes hard and calculating. The room fell silent as the judge entered, taking her place at the bench. "We are gathered here today to discuss the matter of financial fraud and theft," she began. "Present your case." My lawyer stepped forward, presenting the evidence of the unauthorized transfers and Ethan's deception. The paper trail was undeniable, every detail meticulously recorded. The judge frequently glanced up from the documents, looking first at Ethan and then at me. Ethan's lawyer made a valiant attempt to argue that the money was gifted willingly, but the evidence against them was insurmountable. When Lydia was called to the stand, her arrogance was palpable. "That money was for my son," she declared. "It was only right that he should have it." "But it wasn't yours to take," I replied calmly when it was my turn to speak. "And it wasn't yours to keep," Lydia snapped, pointing a shaking finger at me. The judge interjected. "This isn't about family dynamics. This is about the law, and the law is clear on this matter." Hours seemed to stretch on as the proceedings continued. When the final verdict was read, vindication surged through me. Ethan was ordered to return every cent he had taken, and additional punitive damages were awarded to me for the deceit and emotional trauma. After the hearing, as I stepped out into the crisp air, I felt lighter than I had in months. This was more than just a legal victory. It was my emancipation from the shackles of deception, disrespect, and manipulation. Ethan approached, his face pale. "I'm sorry," he murmured, not meeting my eyes. I looked at him, really looked at him, and for a moment I saw the man I had fallen in love with. But that image was quickly replaced by the reality of who he had become. "It's too late for sorry," I replied. As I walked away, I felt a sense of finality. It was the end of a painful chapter in my life, but it was also the beginning of a new one where I was in control, where I was free. That evening, as I sat in my home, the silence was soothing. There were no more whispers, no more deceit, no more games. I had reclaimed my life, my dignity, and my peace. And as the sun set, casting a warm golden hue across the room, I knew that tomorrow would be a new day, full of promise and endless possibilities.
Life seemed perfectly ordinary with my husband, Ryan. Our evening routine, his light snoring, our shared love for board games on Sunday afternoons. But it all changed one night when I caught him taking late-night calls with a woman named Clara. He assured me she's just a friend, but my gut told me otherwise. As I delved deeper, I uncovered debts, poker games, a formidable Russian named Voronov, and a web of deceit. From high-stakes poker tables to the dark underbelly of the gambling world, join me on this roller coaster journey of betrayal, revenge, and the lengths one will go to save what's dear to them. Every marriage has its secrets, but nothing prepared me for this. My name is Amanda, and this is my unusual story. It was a mild Thursday evening. I was curled up on the couch with my cat, Whiskers, engrossed in the latest episode of my favorite crime drama. The apartment was dimly lit, with the orange glow from the television casting shadows on the walls. The muted hum of the city outside only added to the cozy ambiance. But that ambiance was shattered when I heard it. My husband Ryan's phone vibrating on the kitchen counter. I glanced at the clock. 2:37 a.m. Who calls at this hour? I thought to myself. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. Ryan was in the shower, probably unaware of the call. Curiosity got the best of me. I walked over, and the screen displayed unknown caller. I ignored it and went back to the couch, but the nagging feeling persisted. Over the next few weeks, these late-night calls became more frequent. Each time, Ryan would glance at his phone, his face unreadable, and step out of the room to take the call. Every time I asked who it was, he'd say, "Oh, just an old friend catching up." But there was something off about his demeanor. The confident, easygoing man I knew seemed to be replaced by someone edgy, almost secretive. I felt it, that unsettling knot in my stomach. Suspicion started to creep in. One morning, as I was getting ready for work, I found a tiny note in his jacket pocket. "Meet me at the park, 8 p.m. No name, no explanation. I have to know, I said to myself, anxiety and determination warring within me. I decided to take things into my own hands. Revenge? No, not yet. But if he was playing games, I was ready to play them tenfold. It was a risk, but I knew I needed evidence. So I borrowed a voice-activated recorder from a tech-savvy friend and hid it under our bed, hoping to catch one of their conversations. Days went by, and finally, on a rainy Tuesday evening, the recorder caught something. Ryan's voice, sounding almost desperate. "I can't keep doing this. It's not right. She's my wife. She doesn't deserve this." A female voice, cold and unfamiliar, responded, "You owe me, remember? You either continue or things will get ugly." My heart pounded, blood rushing to my ears. Who was this woman? What did Ryan owe her? So many questions swirled in my head. Revenge wasn't just a fleeting thought now. It was turning into a burning need. I was ready to turn the tables on whoever was trying to ruin my marriage. But first, I needed a plan. The need for answers was overwhelming. Every second that passed was torture, not knowing what secret my husband was keeping, not knowing who this mysterious woman was. My once peaceful home now felt like a ticking time bomb. I had to act. I need allies, I thought, turning to my close circle of friends, Jenny and Mark. They'd stood by me through thick and thin, and I trusted them implicitly. I played the recording to them, and their reactions mirrored my own shock and anger. Jenny, ever the planner, said with a steely look, "We're going to find out who this woman is and what she wants." Mark, the tech guru of our trio, suggested we trace the unknown calls. A few clicks and codes later, we had a lead. The calls originated from a tiny coffee shop downtown, known for its quiet corners and private booths. Dressed in inconspicuous clothing, the three of us decided to stake out the cafe. Hours passed with no sign of the mysterious woman. Just when I was about to give up, she walked in. Her raven black hair, red lips, and striking green eyes made her stand out instantly. She seemed to be waiting for someone, nervously glancing at her phone. Suddenly, the door swung open again. My heart skipped a beat. It was Ryan. Their conversation was hushed, but the tension between them was palpable. I needed to hear their conversation. Thinking on my feet, I took out my phone, dialed the cafe's number, and informed them of a fake gas leak. Panic ensued, and everyone evacuated, including Ryan and the mystery woman. As they stepped out, Jenny, pretending to be a panicked patron, accidentally spilled her coffee on the woman, while I quickly slipped another voice recorder into Ryan's coat pocket. As we regrouped at Jenny's apartment later, we anxiously played back the recording. "She's getting suspicious," Ryan whispered. "You think I care?" "You know what you have to do," she retorted. Ryan's voice trembled. "This isn't about money anymore, is it? It's about control." She laughed, a chilling sound. "You're in no position to question me." I sat there, my emotions a whirlwind of anger, sadness, and betrayal. But underlying all of it was a burning determination. I needed to confront Ryan, but not before I found out who this woman truly was and what she wanted. As the evening turned into night, Mark made a startling discovery. The woman, it turns out, was Clara, a name that took me back to our college days. Clara was Ryan's ex-girlfriend, known for her manipulative tendencies and vengeful streaks. But why was she back? And what hold did she have over Ryan? I decided then and there that Clara had picked the wrong woman to mess with. Revenge wasn't just an idea, it was a plan in motion. That night, my mind was abuzz with memories of Clara. The extravagant parties she'd throw, the trail of broken hearts she'd left, and the rumors of her involvement in some shady dealings. I thought she'd disappeared from our lives for good, I mused aloud. Jenny squeezed my hand. "We'll get through this, no matter what she's planning." The next morning, we were back at the coffee shop. Our mission: to uncover Clara's current life. Mark, with his penchant for all things tech, had hacked into Clara's social media accounts. As we scrolled through her pictures, one caught my eye: Clara at a high-end casino, surrounded by well-known criminals. "That's it," Mark whispered, pointing to a man beside Clara. "That's Dmitry Voronov, one of the most feared mobsters in the city." The pieces of the puzzle started falling into place. Clara was in deep with some seriously dangerous people. But how did Ryan fit into all of this? My determination to find answers took us to the casino. It was opulent, with gold trimmings, chandeliers, and an atmosphere charged with anticipation. Clara was there, seated at a high-stakes poker table with Voronov. I'd come prepared. With a wig and a change of clothes, I was unrecognizable. Taking a deep breath, I approached the poker table and asked for a game. To my surprise, Clara didn't recognize me. As the game progressed, I could feel Clara's frustration rising. I was winning, and she didn't like it. Taking a gamble, I leaned in and whispered, "You might be used to having control, but not tonight." Clara's eyes widened, but before she could react, I pulled out an envelope. It contained photos of her with Voronov, evidence of their illicit dealings. "What do you want?" she hissed. "I want you to leave my husband alone," I stated. She scoffed. "You think this is about Ryan? This is bigger than your little love story." I had her attention now. "Tell me everything, or these go to the police." She sighed, defeated. "Fine. Ryan owes me. Years ago, I helped him out financially, and now I need him to pay up. Voronov is my insurance. But trust me, once I get what I want, Ryan will be free." I was taken aback. This was about money? "How much does he owe you?" $50,000, she replied. Mark, who had been listening in, interjected, "Looks like you're having a bad night, Clara. What if we strike a deal?" And just like that, we had a plan. A poker game where the stakes were high and the outcome could change everything. As the evening wore on, our high-stakes poker game drew a crowd. Clara, with her piercing eyes and sharp wit, was known as a force to be reckoned with at the casino. But tonight, she looked rattled. Every time she glanced my way, her confidence seemed to wane. I thought to myself, is this really about the money, or is there something more? The tension was palpable. "You're playing with fire," Clara whispered menacingly during a break. I replied, "Sometimes fire is the only way to cleanse." Mark, ever the tech genius, had set up a discreet live stream of the game. Thousands were now watching online, enraptured by the unfolding drama. He'd also set up a crowdfund, pitching it as the game to save a marriage. Donations started pouring in. As the hours ticked by, the pot grew larger and larger. Clara was losing, and she knew it. The mounting pressure made her sloppy. Finally, in a dramatic final hand, I won. But it wasn't just about the money. It was about taking back control. I could see the defeat in Clara's eyes, and for a brief moment, I felt sorry for her. But then I remembered all the pain and chaos she had brought into my life. Jenny sidled up to me, her eyes shining. "You did it!" I hugged her tightly. "We did it!" We had more than enough to pay off Ryan's debt, with a significant amount left over. I decided to donate it to a charity supporting victims of scams. However, the story doesn't end here. With Clara defeated at the poker table, we had a false sense of security. Little did we know that Voronov wasn't going to let things go so easily. 2 days later, as I was leaving work, a black car pulled up beside me. The window rolled down, revealing Voronov's cold, steely eyes. "You may have won the game," he hissed, "but you haven't won the war." Chills ran down my spine. I had no doubt he was serious. "I suggest you pay back every penny," he continued, "or your dear husband will pay the price." I was stunned. This had gone far beyond a simple debt. It was personal, and Voronov was out for revenge. That night, my mind raced as I considered our options. Going to the police seemed the obvious choice, but would they be able to protect us from someone as powerful and well-connected as Voronov? What had Ryan gotten us into? As I lay in bed, a plan began to form. If we were going to get out of this, we needed to be strategic and use the element of surprise. "I have an idea," I said to myself, a glint of determination in my eyes. The memories of Ryan's pleading eyes when I found him bound and gagged in that dingy basement played on a loop in my mind. I was running on pure adrenaline as Clara and I made our way to the high-stakes poker table. Voronov's goons kept a close eye on us, ensuring we didn't try to flee or pull a fast one. The room was smoke-filled, and an underlying tension hung thick in the air. Old men with sharp eyes and younger ones with even sharper suits surrounded the table. The chandelier overhead cast shadows that made it seem like we were all part of some grotesque painting. "She's just a friend," Ryan's words echoed in my mind. It seemed surreal that all this chaos stemmed from a woman who was supposedly just a friend. "Welcome to the table, Mrs. Ryan," sneered Voronov, wearing an obnoxious gold suit that screamed mobster. The stakes? Enough money to clear Ryan's debts and my husband's life. Clara, who had grown up in underground poker circuits, had taught me a thing or two over the past few days. But nothing can truly prepare you for a game where your husband's life is on the line. Chips were tossed, cards were dealt, eyes darted. "You got this," I whispered to myself, trying to calm my racing heart. 2 hours felt like 2 lifetimes. Bluffs were called, hands were lost, and the pile of chips in front of me slowly but surely began to grow. With every hand won, Voronov's smile faded just a smidge, replaced by a mounting fury. Clara sent me silent nods of encouragement from the sidelines. The final hand arrived. I had a pair of queens. Betting went around the table. Voronov raised the stakes, trying to intimidate me into folding, but I saw the briefest flash of doubt in his eyes. He was bluffing. I pushed all my chips to the center of the table. All in. The room was silent. Voronov sneered. "You think you can beat me with a mere pair of queens?" He laid out his cards, a pair of tens. The room erupted in gasps and mumbled conversations. The stack of money in the middle of the table was pushed towards me. Voronov, furious and embarrassed, stormed out with a trail of goons behind him. Clara and I rushed back to the basement. With the debts cleared, Ryan was released, albeit with a few bruises. As we drove back home, the weight of what had transpired began to sink in. Ryan sobbed, apologizing for the mess he had dragged us into. And Clara, The mysterious woman who was supposedly just a friend turned out to be his savior and mine. It was she who had tipped off Ryan about Voronov's tricks at poker, leading to his debt in the first place. It was a ploy to get back at Voronov for a personal vendetta. But she hadn't anticipated things to escalate this far. Ryan and I needed time to rebuild, to find trust again. And while Clara's actions had indirectly put us in danger, she was also the reason we got out of it. We parted on amicable terms, with her heading back to the poker circuit, hoping to use the winnings to bring down more corrupt players like Voronov. Life slowly returned to its mundane rhythm, but with a newfound appreciation for the ordinary moments. Late-night calls were replaced by late-night cuddles, and I couldn't have been happier. The end of this chapter, however, was just the beginning of another. Ryan and I started attending therapy, both as a couple and individually. We opened a small cafe using the winnings as seed money, naming it Clara's, as a nod to the woman who changed our lives in more ways than one. As for Voronov, rumors say he left the country, his reputation tarnished, but every so often I can't help but glance over my shoulder, just in case. After all, in a game of high stakes, you can never be too careful.
The sun poured into our cozy kitchen, reflecting off the well-used countertops and worn-out wooden table. Jake and I sat across from each other, absorbed in our morning routines. I thumbed through a cookbook, trying to find new recipes for the upcoming week, while Jake caught up on the latest news, newspaper sprawled in front of him. "You remember my work event next weekend?" I began, breaking the comfortable silence. "It's that big fundraiser, the one I've been talking about for weeks." Jake, looking up with a thoughtful expression, responded, "Ah, the annual gala, right? With all your colleagues and their fancy dresses and tuxedos?" I chuckled. "Exactly that one. It's important to me, Jake. It'd mean a lot if you came, and not just for a brief appearance." His eyes twinkled as he teased, "Trying to show off your successful, charming husband, are we?" I playfully swatted his arm. "Oh, hush. You know it's not like that. But yes, it's crucial for networking, and having you by my side would give me a confidence boost." He nodded, taking a bite of his toast. "I promise I'll be there, by your side, throughout. Besides, it gives me a chance to see you dressed up, and I never pass that up." We both laughed at that, knowing full well he loved any excuse to get dressed up himself. Just then, his phone buzzed, diverting his attention. He read a message and sighed audibly. "My car's stuck at the mechanics again. I thought they'd have fixed it by now. This is going to mess up my whole day." Seeing his frustration, I quickly offered, "Why don't you take my car? I don't have any major plans today. Just some cleaning and maybe catching up on a book." He looked up, clearly surprised. "Are you sure, Alex? I don't want to leave you stranded." I pushed my car keys towards him. "I've got 2 legs and a whole neighborhood of friends. If I really need to, I'll find a way. Plus, Mrs. Henderson next door owes me a favor. I helped her with her garden last week, remember?" He smiled, relief evident on his face. "Thanks, love. You always know how to make things work. I promise I'll fill up the tank as a thank you." I grinned. "And maybe grab some of that ice cream I love on your way back?" He winked. "Deal." This simple exchange, a routine part of our daily life, unknowingly sowed the seeds for the tempest that was about to hit our lives. As soon as Jake left with the car, I went on a cleaning spree. The house needed some sprucing up, and there's no time like the present. I cranked up the volume of our old radio, letting the upbeat tunes fill our home. From scrubbing the kitchen counters to vacuuming the living room rug, the hours seemed to melt away. In the midst of my cleaning, I realized I'd missed our little indoor plants that needed watering. While attending to them, I noticed the framed photos on our shelves, documenting our years together. From our first camping trip, where Jake tried to set up a tent and failed hilariously, to our family gatherings where both our families mingled as one. It felt surreal how much we'd built together over the years. As I was lost in memories, I felt a sudden wave of anxiety. Glancing at the wall clock, I noted the time. It had been hours since Jake left, and I hadn't heard a word from him. Pulling out my phone, I checked for missed calls or texts. Nothing. Just as I was crafting a message to him, my phone rang, the screen showing unknown caller. Taking a deep breath, I answered, "Hello? Is this Mrs. Alex Williams?" The voice, firm and unfamiliar, sent a chill down my spine. "It is. Who am I speaking to?" "This is Officer Mitchell from the City Police. I'm sorry to inform you there's been an accident involving a car registered in your name." My heart pounded loudly in my ears. "Jake, is he okay? Please tell me he's okay." "He's injured but conscious. You might want to come down here." I felt my knees weaken. "Where are you located? I'll be there immediately." The officer provided the location, trying to assure me it wasn't the worst-case scenario, but it did little to calm my racing mind. On the verge of tears, I rushed outside, desperately searching for a quick way to get to the crash site. Mrs. Henderson, the elderly lady next door and one of the kindest souls I knew, saw my distress. "Alex? What's wrong, dear?" "Jake, accident. I need to get there," I blurted, the words coming out all jumbled. Mrs. Henderson didn't miss a beat. "My grandson's car is here. Take it. Go." "I can't thank you enough, Mrs. Henderson," I managed to say as she handed me the keys. "You bring that boy back safe and sound, and let me know if you need anything." I nodded, the weight of the situation hitting me as I headed towards the crash site, hoping and praying that everything would be all right. The accident scene was overwhelming. Traffic was diverted, emergency lights swirled, and curious onlookers whispered amongst themselves, their eyes locked on the site of the crash. As I parked and made my way towards the commotion, I tried to quell the panic that threatened to engulf me. A nearby officer noticed my distress. "Can I help you, ma'am?" "My husband, Jake Williams, he was in the accident," I stammered. He guided me through the crowd to where Jake was. Seeing him with paramedics, a cut on his forehead and an arm in a sling, brought both relief and concern. He was okay, but he wasn't unscathed. "Jake!" I rushed to his side. He tried to smile, his face pale. "Hey, Alex, looks worse than it feels." I gently touched his cheek. "What happened?" Before Jake could answer, a man approached, extending his hand. "Hi, I'm Tom. It was my car that collided with yours." Shaking his hand hesitantly, I responded, "Are you okay?" "Just a few scratches, nothing serious. But I'm more concerned about your husband and the lady who was with him," Tom said, his eyes darting towards Jake. I looked at Jake, waiting for an explanation. "Who was she?" Jake sighed. "She's a colleague from work. We had a meeting, and I offered her a ride home since it was on the way." "Why haven't I heard about her before?" My voice betrayed a hint of suspicion. "It was just work. I didn't think to mention it. And with the car situation today, it just happened," Jake replied, trying to calm the brewing storm. Tom added, "She seemed pretty shaken up after the crash. She took off even before the paramedics arrived. Thought it was strange." This revelation added more questions than answers. I frowned. "Why would she run off?" Jake shrugged. "Maybe she panicked. I don't know." We all fell into an uncomfortable silence. The paramedics were preparing to transport Jake to the hospital for a more thorough checkup. As we prepared to leave, Tom, trying to make amends, said, "I'll take care of the insurance and all. I should have been more careful." I nodded, my mind preoccupied with the mystery passenger and what that meant for our relationship. As the ambulance started up, I made a silent vow to uncover the truth, no matter where it led. After ensuring Jake was settled in his hospital room, my thoughts shifted to the DVR in our car. It was a relatively new addition, a birthday gift from Jake after I'd mentioned wanting one. The irony that this device might shed light on Jake's recent actions wasn't lost on me. "I'll be back soon, Jake," I whispered, giving him a light kiss on the forehead. He seemed drowsy from the pain medication. "Where are you going?" he mumbled. "Just need to sort out some things related to the car. I'll be quick," I reassured him. Heading back to the accident site, the tow truck was already loading our battered vehicle. "Excuse me," I approached the driver. "I need to retrieve something from the car." He looked me over, likely identifying me from my earlier presence at the scene. "Sure, be quick." I nodded, opened the passenger side, and swiftly removed the DVR, hoping its contents remained intact. Back home, my hands trembled as I connected the device to our television. The first few clips were mundane: trips to the grocery store, a visit to my sister's house. But then I found the footage from earlier that day. It began innocently enough: Jake driving, occasionally switching radio stations. Then a woman entered the frame. Even from the side profile, I recognized her. It was Melissa, a coworker Jake had occasionally mentioned. Their conversation was casual at first. They discussed a project they were collaborating on, some office gossip. But as the journey continued, their chat became more personal. They laughed at shared memories, and Melissa reminisced about a fun night a few weeks ago. My heart sank further when the crash happened on the screen. I watched as Melissa, in a moment of panic, hugged Jake tightly and then planted a fleeting kiss on his lips before escaping from the scene. The weight of what I'd seen pressed down on me. Their relationship wasn't just professional. I felt betrayed, hurt, and unsure of what to do next. Taking a deep breath, I ejected the DVR and placed it in a drawer. Whether it was evidence of infidelity or just a friendly bond taken out of context, I needed to confront Jake. But for now, I needed some time alone to process everything. The sun shone a bit brighter the next morning, but its warm rays did little to alleviate the storm inside my heart. With every passing second, the DVR footage played in my mind over and over, but I wasn't going to suffer in silence. It was time everyone knew about Jake's deceit, especially those who believed in our perfect union. I started with Lucy, my oldest and dearest friend. Our history stretched back to our school days, long before Jake entered the picture. "Lucy," I began as soon as she picked up, "I'm having a get-together at our place tonight. Jake's coming home from the hospital." She sensed the unease in my voice. "Alex, what's wrong? Why the sudden party?" "Just come over," I urged. "There's something you need to see." Next, I phoned Jake's family. His mother, always so warm towards me, was delighted. "That's a wonderful idea, dear. We've all been so worried." I could hear Jake's father in the background. "Make sure there's beer," he shouted jovially. Even Michelle, Jake's overbearing sister, was pleased. "It's about time you did something right for my brother," she remarked snidely. Throughout the day, I busied myself with preparations. There was food to be cooked, wine to be chilled, and a living room to be rearranged for the night's entertainment. By the time guests began arriving, our home was filled with the tantalizing aroma of roasted chicken and baked goods. Jake, having been discharged earlier, walked in to find our house bustling with activity. He looked surprised, yet pleased. "What's going on?" he asked, a small smile forming on his lips. I forced cheeriness into my voice. "Just a small gathering to let everyone see that you're all right." He leaned in, kissing my forehead. "You're full of surprises." Lucy, who had been watching from a distance, approached us. "Glad to see you up and about, Jake," she said, though her eyes were questioning as they met mine. The evening progressed, filled with light-hearted banter and the clinking of glasses. Michelle was, predictably, the loudest, sharing stories of Jake's childhood, much to his embarrassment. The laughter and chatter provided a stark contrast to the turmoil inside me. As dinner ended and people moved to the living room, I knew the moment had come. "I've got something to show everyone," I announced, holding the DVR remote. Jake looked puzzled. "What's this about, Alex?" I pressed play without answering. The room fell silent, save for the video's audio. As the scene with Melissa played out, gasps filled the room. Jake's face turned ashen, realizing what was happening. As the video ended, Lucy broke the silence. "Alex, what was that?" Jake, flustered, tried to interject. "It's not what you think." The room was abuzz with whispers, and all eyes were on the two of us. The stage was set for Jake to finally explain himself. The weight of the truth descended heavily on the room, muffling the chatter that had once filled it with joyful noise. Stunned faces looked from the now silent screen to Jake, their expressions ranging from shock to disappointment. Lucy, forever the anchor in my life, was the first to voice her confusion, her eyes darting between Jake and me. "Alex, why would you show this? What's happening?" Jake, sensing the rising tide of questions and accusations, tried to take control of the narrative. Listen, everyone, it's not what it seems. Melissa just needed a ride. The hug, the kiss, it was just in the heat of the moment after the crash. Michelle, eyebrows furrowed and usually so critical of me, looked distraught. Jake, you're not making sense. First the rumors, and now this? Why would she even be with you in the first place? He looked down, searching for words. It was a work thing. We got close. But it wasn't serious. It was just a one-time thing. Jake's mother, Mrs. Anderson, a pillar of grace and kindness, looked shattered. "Oh, Jacob," she murmured, her voice tinged with disbelief. "This isn't like you. You and Alex, you were the ideal couple." His father, Mr. Anderson, a man of few words, had a deep frown etched on his face. "Son, you need to explain everything. This isn't just about you two anymore. It's about the family." Sarah, Jake's younger cousin, who had idolized him, looked close to tears. "Jake, why? Alex has been nothing but kind to all of us." Jake, increasingly desperate, replied, "I made a mistake. I don't know how it spiraled this far." Lucy tightened her grip on my hand. "Alex, I've known you both for years. You two were inseparable, the perfect team. Whatever this is, it needs to be dealt with." I took a deep breath. "I know, Lucy. I thought we were strong, that nothing could break us. But now, I don't know." Amid the murmurs and discussions, Michelle walked over, her demeanor softer. "Alex, I'm so sorry for the way I've treated you. And to think my brother was doing this, I was wrong about you." The room was thick with a mix of empathy, regret, and unanswered questions. It was evident that our relationship had changed in the eyes of everyone, and the path ahead would be an uphill one. After the eventful evening, the house was filled with an uncomfortable silence. Some relatives had decided to leave, wanting to avoid any more drama, while others stayed, trying to offer comfort, or simply too shocked to move. I retreated to our bedroom, wanting some time to myself, but Lucy followed. She sat next to me on the bed, placing an arm around my shoulders. "Alex, are you okay?" I sighed deeply. I thought I was prepared for whatever came next, but seeing everyone's reactions, it just made it all too real. Lucy hesitated, then said, "There's something else you should know." I looked at her, my heart racing. "What?" She took out her phone, opening Melissa's social media profile. There, in her recent uploads, was a picture of a hand with a very familiar watch. Lucy pointed. "I noticed this earlier. It's Jake's watch, right?" Tears welled up in my eyes. "Yes, that's his watch. I gave it to him on our 5th anniversary." Lucy continued. "This photo was taken in your bedroom, Alex. Look at the background. It's your dressing table." I was taken aback. How could he? Bringing her into our home, our sanctuary? It's a violation. There was a soft knock on the door. Michelle peeked in, her face pale. "May I come in?" I nodded, still trying to process everything. Michelle hesitated. "I saw the photo Lucy's talking about. It's unmistakable. I'm so sorry, Alex. I had no idea Jake was capable of this." I replied, "Neither did I." Michelle looked down. "I spoke to him downstairs. He's remorseful, to say the least, but I told him he needs to come clean about everything." Lucy, ever the protective friend, asked, "Do you want to confront him?" I took a deep breath. "Yes, but not now. I need time to think, to process everything." Michelle nodded. "Take all the time you need. Just know that I'm here for you. We all are." The weight of the entire situation hung heavily. My trust was shattered, but the support from those around me, especially from unexpected quarters, provided a small solace. The morning sun filtered through the sheer curtains, casting muted shadows across the ornate living room. Soft melodies from a forgotten radio played in the background, clashing dramatically with the tension that was almost palpable. I stood at the entrance for a moment, gathering my composure. Jake was already there, fidgeting nervously, while Lucy and Michelle whispered in hushed tones at a corner. The chandelier above shone brilliantly, illuminating the room but failing to dispel the gloom. Drawing a deep breath, I broke the silence. "Jake, I've had a restless night, but I need every single detail now." He looked up, his face pale, shadows underlining his guilt-ridden eyes. "Alex, it's complicated, but you deserve to know." Lucy snorted derisively. "Complicated? Cheating on your wife is complicated? Spare us the theatrics." Jake shot back, clearly agitated. "Lucy, this is between me and Alex. Stay out of it." Michelle, always the peacemaker, stepped forward. "We're all involved now, Jake, but let's keep this civil." I nodded. "She's right. Start from the beginning, Jake." Rubbing his forehead, Jake began. "A few months ago, with all the pressure at work, Melissa was the one person who understood what I was going through. We were just friends at first, but things spiraled out of control." Lucy, unable to contain her anger, exclaimed, "And you thought bringing her to your home was a good idea? Where's your respect, Jake?" Michelle sighed deeply. "Lucy's right. That's just unforgivable." Jake, close to tears, responded, "I regret it every single day, every moment. But Melissa, she has this pull. It's not an excuse, but I felt trapped." Lucy's voice dripped with sarcasm. "Oh, the trapped card. Classic." I intervened. "Enough, Lucy. Jake, was our marriage ever real to you?" Jake's voice broke. "It was, Alex. It is. I made a terrible, terrible mistake. I can't change the past, but I'd do anything for a chance at redemption." Michelle, her eyes moist, said, "Jake, some things once broken can't be mended. It's a hard truth." Lucy whispered, mostly to herself, "We thought you were different, but you proved us wrong." Facing Jake, I stated with finality, "I need to find happiness again. Away from all this. Away from you. I'm filing for divorce." Jake's plea was almost a whisper. "Alex, if there's even a shred of love left, please reconsider." But my mind was made up. This isn't about love anymore, Jake. It's about self-worth. Lucy and Michelle closed in, their support evident. As I moved towards the door, I threw one last glance at the life I was leaving behind, a chapter closing, and a new one waiting to unfold.
At the heart of every story lies a decision, a twist of fate that changes everything. I used to believe in the fairy tales of love, trust, and shared dreams. But when betrayal hit close to home, it reshaped my world in ways I could never have imagined. This is a tale of corporate challenges, hidden vendettas, and personal revelations. Dive into a journey that took me from the comforting arms of love to the cold clutches of revenge, and, surprisingly, back to the warm embrace of understanding and redemption. If you've ever been caught in the crossfire of love and ambition, this story might just resonate with you. Join me as I navigate the intricate web of emotions, decisions, and consequences that fate spun for me. My name is Hannah, and this is my story. The morning the betrayal came to light started innocuously enough. It was a Wednesday, the middle of a work week, and my morning coffee had just finished brewing. But with the sound of my phone buzzing on the kitchen counter, my life was about to take a dark, unexpected turn. An anonymous email hit my inbox, and the contents shook my world to its core. "Hey there," it began. "You don't know me, but I thought you should know about your husband's little secret venture. Check the attachments." Curiosity piqued. My fingers trembled as I clicked open the attached documents. What unfolded before my eyes was evidence of my husband, Richard, secretly funneling company funds into his private account. Funds from the company I had dedicated the past decade of my life to. I felt like I was free-falling. A mix of anger, pain, and confusion bubbled up inside me. How could he do this? I whispered to myself. After everything we built together? It didn't take long for the scandal to explode. Word got out, and the board members were swift in their actions. By the end of the week, I was let go. The fall woman for a betrayal I had no part in. Richard disappeared, leaving me to deal with the fallout. Friends who I thought were genuine began to distance themselves. The life I had built was crumbling around me. Months later, after drowning in depression, I decided to rebuild. Not for Richard, not for my old life, but for myself. I started at a new company, Fresh Start Tech, and things began looking up. Every night, as I went to bed, I'd tell myself, tomorrow will be better, tomorrow will be brighter. And then, as if by some twisted joke, he resurfaced. Richard, after laying low for months, had the audacity to apply for a position at my new company. And here's the kicker. He didn't know I worked there. As I sat at my desk, reading his application that had landed in my inbox due to a system error, a wicked idea began to form. Karma is about to make a U-turn, I said to myself with a smirk. Pulling up the email, I began typing, "Dear Richard." And just like that, my plan was set into motion. What followed was a series of events that I can only describe as fate's sweetest revenge. I leaned back in my chair, formulating my thoughts. The office was quiet, save for the hum of the air conditioning. The dim lighting from my desk lamp illuminated Richard's resume, making me think of all the possibilities. "Dear Richard," I began. "Thank you for applying to Fresh Start Tech. We're intrigued by your application. We would like to schedule an interview. How does tomorrow sound?" I hesitated before hitting send. Is this really what I want? I asked myself, feeling a pang of guilt. But then, images of my past, losing my job, my reputation, and everything I had worked so hard for, flashed before me. I clicked send before I could second-guess myself any further. The reply came sooner than I expected. "Tomorrow sounds great," Richard responded. "I'm looking forward to it." His signature at the end, with that familiar pompous flair, reignited my determination. I pulled Jane, the HR head, into my office. "You remember Richard, right?" I began, explaining the whole fiasco and my plan to her. Jane, a fierce protector of her employees and a woman scorned once too often herself, was immediately on board. "Let's make him squirm," she said with a wicked grin. The day of the interview, I felt an odd mix of excitement and anxiety. My heart raced as I took my position behind the one-way mirror of the observation room, adjacent to the interview area. Jane was to lead the interview, but I would be watching his every move, every reaction. Richard walked in, looking as confident as ever. The arrogance in his stride was just as I remembered. Jane began the interview in the most ordinary way, asking about his experience, why he wanted to join Fresh Start, the usual stuff. But then, the questions started becoming more personal. "How would you handle betrayal from someone you trust?" she asked, eyeing him intently. Richard shifted uncomfortably, clearing his throat. I believe trust is the foundation of any relationship, be it professional or personal," he stuttered, clearly caught off guard. Jane continued. "Have you ever faced a situation where your integrity was questioned?" His face flushed, beads of sweat forming on his brow. I suppressed a smirk, taking a sip of my coffee. The show had just begun. He struggled through the rest of the questions, the atmosphere thick with tension. And then, just when he thought it was over, Jane delivered the final blow. "We've recently hired someone you might know," she said nonchalantly, sliding a photo across the table. A photo of me, taken during a recent office party. I could almost feel the blood drain from Richard's face. I didn't know she worked here," he murmured, his voice barely above a whisper. Jane leaned in, her face inches from his. "Oh, didn't you? Well, she's doing great, by the way, thriving even. Funny how life turns out, huh?" The interview ended shortly after. Richard practically sprinted out of the room, his dreams of a cushy job at Fresh Start Tech shattered. As the door closed behind him, Jane walked into the observation room, her face beaming. "That felt good," she said, high-fiving me. I smiled, taking a deep breath. "It's a start," I replied. "But I've got a feeling this is just the beginning." Word quickly spread around the office about Richard's disastrous interview. My colleagues were supportive, their whispers of encouragement mingling with disdain for Richard's audacity. For once, office gossip was on my side. A week later, a colleague named Marcus popped his head into my office. "Heard you're a coding genius," he started. I raised an eyebrow in surprise. I did know coding, but genius might have been stretching it. There's an anonymous blog going around about Fresh Start's successes and failures. Some posts have sensitive information that only someone internal would know. My heart sank. It couldn't be. Richard wouldn't be so brazen, would he? "Show me," I demanded. Marcus handed over his tablet, and the anonymous blog stared back at me. Sure enough, there were posts suggesting inside knowledge. One post even hinted at my past, with just enough vagueness to stoke curiosity without outright stating facts. I thought back to Richard's technical prowess. He wasn't just good, he was excellent. Tracing him would be a challenge. I need to figure out who's behind this, I said to myself, my determination rekindling. Over the next few days, I dove deep into the virtual world, dusting off old coding skills and seeking help from hacker forums. I was up against a mastermind, but two could play that game. Late one night, as I pored over lines of code and server logs, a breakthrough came. An IP address, hidden behind layers of encryption, pointed to a familiar location. Richard's old office space, which he had converted into a makeshift apartment post our fallout. Now, with evidence in hand, I needed a plan. I called Jane and Marcus, and together, we hatched a strategy. Using the blog as bait, we would create a fake company scandal, something so juicy Richard wouldn't be able to resist posting. Over the next few days, fabricated emails about a potential merger, one that would jeopardize hundreds of jobs, were strategically leaked where Richard could find them. As expected, the story was up on his blog within hours. The trap was set. As the story exploded online, our fictional narrative played out perfectly. Employees, in on the ruse, expressed faux outrage on social media, amplifying the chatter. Every local news outlet was talking about the upcoming merger at Fresh Start Tech. By now, Richard was probably reveling in his perceived success, believing he had inflicted maximal damage. But our team was only getting started. Jane used her media contacts to hint that the whistleblower might be a disgruntled ex-employee with a personal vendetta. The focus slowly shifted from the scandal to the mysterious blogger. Then, Marcus approached me with a wild idea. "What if we can tie him up financially too?" he mused. I was intrigued. Marcus explained that with Richard's technical expertise, he had to be using a VPN and other premium tools to keep his activities covered. Tools that weren't free. With Marcus's knowledge in cyber forensics, we could trace back his digital payments. The task was daunting, but the duo of Marcus and myself was relentless. Days turned into nights as we scoured the depths of the internet, chasing down the breadcrumbs Richard had unwittingly left behind. One afternoon, amidst a pile of payment gateways and masked transactions, a clue emerged. A single payment to a premium VPN service, linked to an account under a pseudonym King Richard used in college. Jackpot. But how would tying him to a VPN payment make a difference? Here's the twist. Using VPNs for malicious activities violated the terms of service of most providers. If we could prove Richard's misdeeds and report them, not only would he lose his cover, but he would also face hefty fines. Gathering all our evidence, we approached the VPN provider. To our delight, they were extremely cooperative, condemning any misuse of their services. Within days, Richard's service was terminated and a significant fine was levied on him. We didn't stop there. We also sent all our findings to other tools and services he had used, ensuring a domino effect of penalties and account closures. Meanwhile, the fake company scandal had served its purpose. The media had grown suspicious. and when no concrete proof of the merger surfaced, they realized they'd been played. Articles began popping up, discrediting the mysterious blogger and his dubious sources. Feeling the heat, Richard finally posted a retraction on his blow, apologizing for spreading misinformation. However, the damage to his credibility was done. His reputation as a reliable source was in tatters. One evening, as I relaxed in my living room, a soft chime alerted me to a new email. The sender, Richard, the content, an apology. He wrote about his regret, his realization of the harm he'd caused, and his desire to make amends. I sat there for a long while, staring at the sincere words on the screen. Part of me wanted to gloat, to revel in the satisfaction of my revenge. But another part, a part I had tried to suppress, remembered the love we once shared. Torn between past emotions and the pain of betrayal, I finally typed a short response. Apology noted. Fresh Start Tech began to flourish in the weeks that followed. Our fake scandal not only brought us into the limelight, but inadvertently acted as free publicity. Applications poured in, sales skyrocketed, and morale around the office was at an all-time high. Yet, amidst the booming success, I couldn't help but feel a void, an emptiness that no amount of professional triumph could fill. After one particularly draining day, I found myself driving aimlessly through the city, lost in thought. The bright city lights, the buzz of traffic, and the distant hum of nightlife created a mesmerizing atmosphere. As I drove, my car seemed to have a mind of its own, guiding me to a familiar location, the coffee shop where Richard and I first met. The place held so many memories, from nervous first date jitters to late-night conversations, planning our future together. Walking in felt like stepping into a time capsule. The same vintage decor, the faint aroma of freshly brewed coffee, and a soft jazz number playing in the background transported me to a happier time. I found a secluded booth at the back and ordered our usual 2 cappuccinos with a hint of cinnamon. As I sipped my drink, the past played before my eyes. I remembered the good times, the dreams we built, and the life we once envisioned. But the lingering taste of betrayal overshadowed all the sweet memories. Lost in thought, I almost didn't notice him. Richard, sitting a few booths away, his face buried in a book. Our eyes met, and for a moment, time seemed to stand still. No words were exchanged, but a million emotions flitted across both our faces. Taking a deep breath, I walked over. "Mind if I join you?" I asked hesitantly. He looked up, surprise evident in his eyes, but he nodded. The conversation that followed was a roller coaster. We laughed, cried, reminisced, and confronted our demons. Richard explained his spiral into deceit, driven by a misguided desire to protect our future. He spoke of his guilt, his nights haunted by remorse, and the realization that he had destroyed the very thing he aimed to safeguard. I listened, my heart warring between anger and empathy. "Why come back? Why apply to Fresh Start?" I finally asked. He sighed. "It was a desperate attempt to correct my mistakes, to be close to you again. But I realize now that some bridges, once burned, can't be rebuilt." The hours flew by, and as dawn approached, a new understanding formed between us. We may not have a future together, but we could find closure and move on with our lives. Before parting ways, Richard handed me an envelope. "I sold some assets," he began. "This is to cover the funds I misused. It's not much, but it's a start." Opening the envelope, I found a check and a letter detailing his plan to repay every single cent he had taken, even if it took him a lifetime. As I walked away from the coffee shop, the weight on my shoulders felt lighter. The chapter with Richard might be closed, but a new chapter was waiting to be written. Life at Fresh Start Tech progressed at a rapid pace. My revenge plot and the emotional rendezvous at the coffee shop seemed like distant memories. Yet, subtle changes became evident in the way I approached work and relationships. Jane noticed first. "You've changed," she observed one day. "Not in a bad way, just different." She was right. The ordeal with Richard had inadvertently taught me the value of forgiveness and the impermanence of grudges. As weeks turned to months, an exciting project landed on our table. Fresh Start Tech had been approached by a nonprofit to develop a software solution for underprivileged children to gain access to quality education. The stakes were high, but so was the potential impact. I threw myself into the project, channeling all my energy and focus. My personal experiences had taught me the importance of second chances, and I was determined to provide one to these children. One evening, while brainstorming ideas with the team, Marcus made a surprising suggestion. "Why not involve Richard? He has the skill set we need." I was taken aback. Trusting Richard professionally after everything felt risky. But then, the memory of our conversation at the coffee shop and his genuine remorse surfaced. The next day, I found myself dialing Richard's number, an action I hadn't anticipated. His voice on the other end sounded surprised but hopeful. Explaining the project, I offered him a consulting role. He accepted without hesitation. "Thank you," he murmured, the gratitude evident in his tone. The project was a whirlwind. Days were filled with coding marathons, brainstorming sessions, and endless cups of coffee. Richard, true to form, was a genius. His expertise was invaluable, and it became clear that his involvement was crucial for the project's success. As the software took shape, something unexpected happened. The walls between Richard and me, constructed from pain and mistrust, began to crumble. We weren't returning to old romantic patterns, but a new, stronger bond of friendship and mutual respect emerged. The day our software launched was one of profound triumph. Thousands of children would benefit from it, and Fresh Start Tech received accolades for its philanthropic venture. At the launch party, Richard approached me, a bottle of our favorite champagne in hand. "To new beginnings," he toasted. I nodded, clinking my glass against his, and to second chances. The journey had been long and tumultuous. From love to betrayal, revenge to forgiveness, and estrangement to camaraderie. But as I stood there amidst the celebration, I realized something crucial. Life is never a straight path. It's a series of twists, turns, and reroutes, but ultimately it leads us exactly where we're meant to be.
Let me introduce you to the main characters in this story. I'm Joanna, and I often found myself consumed by my job. My husband's name is Mark. He's a patient and understanding man. Together, we have a lovely daughter named Lily, a curious bundle of joy who is growing up faster than we could keep up with. And then there's Evelyn, Mark's mother. She's been a part of my life since I married her son, but I can't say we were very close. You see, I was always busy with work, trying to make ends meet and provide for my family. That left me with very little time for visits, especially to Mark's childhood home. Evelyn, on the other hand, wasn't much of an outgoing person. She preferred the comfort of her home over going out, and Mark always said it was because she was often ill. One evening, as I was rushing through another hectic day, I had an epiphany. Lily was growing up fast, and I felt she should get to know her grandmother better. It wasn't fair that she hardly knew Evelyn, and I needed to make amends for my long absence. I mentioned my idea to Mark, who smiled warmly and agreed that it was long overdue. "She's your family too, after all," he said, always the voice of reason. So, despite my never-ending to-do list, we decided to pay Evelyn a visit. It had been a while, and I wanted to make up for lost time. As we drove to her house, I couldn't help but feel a mix of excitement and nervousness. I had spent so little time with her, and I wasn't entirely sure what to expect. When we arrived at her house, it was clear that it hadn't seen a dust rag in ages. Cobwebs clung to the corners, and a thick layer of dust covered everything. It was a mess, to say the least. Lily, always candid, wrinkled her nose in disgust and asked, "Mommy, why is Grandma's house so dirty?" I exchanged a glance with Mark, who chuckled softly. "Well, we're here to fix that, aren't we?" Lily nodded, and we rolled up our sleeves, grabbed some cleaning supplies, and got to work. We scrubbed and dusted, swept, and mopped, while Evelyn watched with a mix of surprise and gratitude. She hadn't expected us to clean her house, and that made our efforts all the more meaningful. As the sun began to set, we decided to call it a day. We'd done a good job, and I was proud of what we'd achieved. It felt like the right step towards bridging the gap between Evelyn and me. Little did I know that this visit would be the start of something unexpected, something that would change everything for our family. After our first visit to Evelyn's place, things began to change. I could see that Lily and Evelyn were warming up to each other, and that made me happy. It was a small step in the right direction. A few weeks later, I decided to take another day off from work to spend time with my family and help Evelyn around the house. It was a weekend, and I wanted to make our visits a regular thing. So I packed up some cleaning supplies, and Lily and I headed over to Evelyn's place again. This time, as we walked through the front door, I could see the surprise on Evelyn's face. She hadn't expected us to return so soon. "We're here to help, Evelyn," I said with a warm smile. Lily chimed in, her eyes shining with enthusiasm. "Yeah, Grandma, we're going to make your house all pretty." Evelyn hesitated for a moment before nodding gratefully. "Thank you, both of you. I appreciate it more than you know." We got to work just like last time, dusting, cleaning, and tidying up. As we worked, Evelyn joined in, and we started talking more than we ever had. It felt good to chat and share stories while we worked. Lily, always full of questions, asked Evelyn about her favorite things. "What's your favorite color, Grandma?" she asked with genuine curiosity. Evelyn smiled. "I've always loved the color blue. It reminds me of the sea, and I find it very calming." Lily nodded, taking in this newfound information. "Blue is nice. I like it too." As the hours passed, we tackled one room after another. I could see Evelyn becoming more comfortable around us. She started reminiscing about Mark's childhood, sharing stories that made us laugh. It was like discovering a whole new side of her. By the time we finished, the house looked entirely different. It was cleaner and brighter, and Evelyn looked at it with a mixture of surprise and gratitude. She said, "I can't remember the last time my house looked this good. Thank you, Joanna, and thank you, Lily." Lily beamed, and I felt a warmth in my heart. Our efforts were paying off, and it seemed like Evelyn was genuinely enjoying our company. I knew we were on the right path, slowly but surely building a stronger bond between us. Little did I know that this simple act of helping out would lead to a series of events that would shake our family to its core. A few more weeks went by, and our visits to Evelyn's house became a regular thing. It was nice seeing her more often, and Lily seemed to adore her grandmother more with each visit. We'd spend our weekends cleaning, chatting, and sometimes even cooking together. One evening, after a particularly productive day of cleaning, we decided to head home as the sun dipped below the horizon. Lily and I climbed into the car, and I started the engine. I felt a sense of contentment, knowing that our family was slowly coming closer together. As we drove down the quiet, winding road, I couldn't help but think about how our relationship with Evelyn was improving. It was then that something unexpected happened. The car started to act strangely, swerving and jerking. Panic welled up inside me as I struggled to regain control. Lily cried out from the back seat, her tiny voice trembling. "Mommy, what's happening?" I gripped the steering wheel, my heart pounding in my chest. "Hold on, Lily," I said, my voice shaky but determined. I fought to keep the car on the road as it veered dangerously close to a tree. It felt like a lifetime in those few moments. Miraculously, we managed to avoid the tree and come to a stop by the side of the road. My hands were trembling as I turned off the engine and took a deep breath. Lily and I were both shaken, but we were unharmed. I hugged her tightly, thankful that we had escaped without a scratch. After ensuring Lily was okay, I got out of the car to inspect the damage. It didn't take long to see what had gone wrong. All 4 of our tires had been slashed. My heart sank as I realized that someone had deliberately done this to us. Lily asked with a quiver in her voice, "Mommy, what happened to the car?" I crouched down to her level, trying to put on a reassuring smile. "Don't worry, sweetie. It looks like someone did something to our tires, but we're safe." I knew I needed to call for help, but I was also beginning to feel a creeping sense of unease. Who would do such a thing? Why would someone want to hurt us? As I reached for my phone to dial for assistance, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was more than just a random act of vandalism. It felt personal, and I couldn't help but wonder if our newfound connection with Evelyn had something to do with it. As I stood by the side of the road, staring at our slashed tires, a growing unease settled in my stomach. It just didn't make sense. Who would want to harm us, especially when we were on our way back from helping Evelyn? The thought of someone targeting my daughter and me was chilling. Lily, sensing my distress, asked, "Mommy, why would someone do this to our car?" I crouched down again, trying to find the right words. "I don't know, sweetheart. It's a mean thing for someone to do, but don't worry, we'll get through this." I dialed the roadside assistance number, and they promised to send help soon. While waiting, I examined the tires more closely. It was evident that they had been deliberately slashed with a sharp object. This wasn't just a random act of mischief. Someone had meant to hurt us. The minutes ticked by slowly, and my thoughts kept circling back to the same question. Who could be behind this? I couldn't come up with a plausible answer. Evelyn had been kind during our recent visits, and there was no reason for her to want to harm us. When the tow truck finally arrived, the driver assessed the damage and confirmed that the tires had been intentionally slashed. He changed them for us, and as we continued our journey home, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Once we arrived home, I decided to take a closer look at the surveillance cameras that were installed around Evelyn's house. Maybe they had captured something that could provide a clue. Lily watched curiously as I reviewed the footage on my laptop. As we scrolled through the recordings, my heart skipped a beat. There it was. The shocking moment when someone had approached our car and slashed the tires. My hands trembled as I replayed the video, and I couldn't believe my eyes. Lily pointed at the screen, her voice trembling. "Mommy, who's that?" I swallowed hard as I recognized the figure in the video. It was Evelyn. She had slashed our tires while we were inside her house. My mind reeled in disbelief. Why would she do such a thing? I closed the laptop, my thoughts in turmoil. I needed answers, and I needed them fast. Lily looked up at me, her innocent eyes filled with confusion and fear. I knew I had to confront Evelyn about what we had discovered, but I couldn't predict what would happen next. The revelation from the surveillance footage had left me in a state of shock. Why would Evelyn, Mark's own mother, slash our car tires? I needed answers, and I needed them fast. I decided to wait until Mark got home to discuss this with him. As I nervously paced the living room, Lily played with her toys, unaware of the turmoil in her mother's mind. When Mark finally arrived, I wasted no time in telling him everything I had discovered. "Mark," I began, my voice trembling, "you won't believe what I found on the surveillance footage. It was your mother who slashed our car tires when we were at her house." Mark's eyes widened in disbelief. "What? That can't be right. My mother wouldn't do something like that." I handed him my laptop and played the footage. As he watched the video, his face grew paler and he seemed torn between denial and acceptance. Lily tugged at her father's sleeve, her voice filled with worry. "Daddy, why did Grandma do that?" Mark struggled to find the right words as he looked down at our daughter. I don't know, Lily. We need to talk to Grandma and find out." As the reality of the situation sank in, I felt a surge of anger and fear. I needed to know the truth and protect my family. "We can't just ignore this, Mark. Someone wanted to hurt us. We have to go to the police." But Mark hesitated, his voice filled with uncertainty. "I think we should talk to Mom first. Try to understand why she did this." I was torn between wanting answers and fearing the consequences of involving the police. "All right," I conceded reluctantly, "but we need to do it soon." That night, Mark and I lay in bed, unable to sleep. The knowledge of Evelyn's actions weighed heavily on both of us. I wondered if there was something more to this than met the eye. Mark's silence spoke volumes, and I couldn't help but feel that he was keeping something from me. Finally, he confessed, "Joanna, there's something you need to know. My mother, she's been struggling with a mental illness, schizophrenia." I gasped, my heart sinking. "Schizophrenia? Why didn't you tell me before?" Mark's eyes filled with regret. "I didn't think it would ever become a problem like this. She's usually stable, but sometimes she has episodes." I couldn't wrap my head around it. My mother-in-law, schizophrenic? It explained her erratic behavior, but it also left me wondering about the extent of her condition and whether it posed a danger to us. As we lay there in the dark, I couldn't help but feel a growing sense of unease. The web of secrets and uncertainty surrounding our family was getting more tangled by the minute. Mark's revelation about his mother's schizophrenia had left me with a whirlwind of emotions. It explained the inexplicable slashing of our car tires, but it also opened a Pandora's box of questions. I knew we needed answers, and we needed them urgently. The next day, after dropping Lily off at school, Mark and I decided to confront Evelyn. We needed to understand the full extent of her condition and her motives behind the act that had endangered our lives. We arrived at Evelyn's house, and Mark knocked on the door. She answered, and her face brightened when she saw us. "Mark, Joanna, what brings you here today?" she asked warmly. Mark took a deep breath, his voice hesitant. "Mom, we need to talk. It's important." Evelyn's smile faded as she sensed the gravity of the situation. We sat down in the living room, and Mark began, "Mom, Joanna found out about the car tires. She saw it on the surveillance cameras." Evelyn's face grew tense, and she avoided eye contact. I don't know what you're talking about." I couldn't contain my frustration anymore. "Evelyn, we have the footage. It was you who did it. Why would you do that?" Tears welled up in her eyes, and her voice trembled. "I didn't want you to leave. I missed you both so much, and I thought if I did something to your car, you would have to stay a little longer." I felt a mix of sympathy and exasperation. It was clear that her actions were driven by her illness, but it didn't make them any less frightening. Mark put his arm around her, trying to comfort her as he said, "Mom, we understand that you missed us, but this wasn't the way to handle it." Evelyn nodded, her shoulders slumped in defeat. I know. I just didn't want to be alone." Mark and I exchanged worried glances. We knew Evelyn needed help beyond what we could provide. Mark gently asked, "Mom, have you been taking your medication regularly?" Evelyn hesitated, her gaze dropping to the floor. "Not as often as I should." Mark sighed, his concern deepening. "We're going to get you the help you need, Mom. We'll take you to see a doctor and get your medication sorted out." Evelyn nodded, tears still in her eyes. "Thank you, both of you. I'm so sorry for what I've done." As we left Evelyn's house that day, I couldn't help but feel a sense of relief that we were finally on the path to getting her the help she needed. But the journey was far from over. Our family had faced some dark and unexpected twists, and we were determined to support Evelyn as she battled her illness. Our family's journey took an unexpected turn with Mark's revelation about his mother's schizophrenia. It left me with a whirlwind of emotions, understanding, compassion, and a sense of responsibility. One evening, after Lily had gone to bed, Mark and I decided it was time to have a crucial conversation with Evelyn. We needed to discuss her treatment plan and address the incident with the slashed car tires. The atmosphere was tense as we sat down in her living room. Mark began carefully. "Mom, we've been discussing your treatment with a psychiatrist, and we're committed to helping you get better. But there's something else we need to talk about." Evelyn, her expression a mix of curiosity and apprehension, nodded and said, "I'm listening." I took a deep breath and said, "Evelyn, we reviewed the surveillance footage from the day our car tires were slashed. It showed that it was you who did it." Evelyn's face paled, and she looked down, unable to meet our eyes. After a moment of silence, she admitted, "Yes, it was me." My heart sank at her confession, and I couldn't help but ask, "But why, Evelyn? We thought you missed us?" Evelyn hesitated, tears welling up in her eyes. "I did miss you both terribly, but there's something I need to confess." Mark and I exchanged concerned glances. We had no idea what else might be lurking beneath the surface of this already complex situation. Evelyn took a deep breath, her voice shaking. "I didn't just slash the tires to make you stay longer. I did it because I was terrified of what I might do." Confusion and worry washed over me, and I asked, "Terrified of what, Evelyn?" Evelyn's voice quivered as she revealed, "There are times when my illness takes over. I hear voices, see things that aren't there. I was afraid that if you left, I might lose control and harm someone, maybe even you or Lily." My heart ached for Evelyn. She had been silently battling these inner demons, struggling with a reality that was beyond our understanding. Mark reached out, taking her hand gently, and said, "Mom, we had no idea. We're here for you, and we'll support you through this. We'll make sure you get the help you need." Evelyn nodded, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you, both of you. I'm so sorry for everything." As we sat there, I realized the depth of the pain and fear Evelyn had been living with. It was a shocking revelation that explained so much, and it made me even more determined to help her on her journey to recovery. Our family had faced adversity, but we were stronger together and ready to face whatever lay ahead. Our family's journey had taken unexpected turns, and the revelation about Evelyn's schizophrenia had opened doors to a deeper understanding of her struggles. Our commitment to her well-being became our top priority. As weeks turned into months, our visits to Evelyn's house became more frequent. We ensured she took her medication, attended therapy sessions, and provided emotional support. Our family dynamic had transformed, and Evelyn was no longer just my mother-in-law. She was family, and her battle was our battle. One evening, as we gathered in her living room, reminiscing and sipping tea, my eyes fell upon an old, weathered box, tucked away on a bookshelf. It was filled with faded photographs, letters, and postcards from Mark's younger days. Lily, always curious, joined me in exploring this treasure trove of memories. "Mommy, who are these people?" Lily asked, pointing at the photographs. I smiled. "These are your daddy's family, sweetie. These photos are from a long time ago." Evelyn watched us with a hint of nostalgia in her eyes. It was evident that this box held a significant place in her heart. As we continued to sift through the box, I discovered an old diary that belonged to Evelyn. It was worn and filled with handwritten pages. I opened it, and as I began to read, I realized that it held the key to a long-buried family secret. Evelyn noticed my expression and gently said, "Joanna, that diary holds the story of our family, a story that I've kept hidden for years." I looked at her, my curiosity piqued. "What kind of story, Evelyn?" She took a deep breath and began to recount the tale from her diary. It was a story of pain, loss, and a family torn apart by a dark secret. A secret that had haunted her for years. A secret that explained why she had been so determined to keep us close. As Evelyn spoke, her voice trembling with emotion, Mark and I listened intently, our hearts heavy with the weight of the revelation. The family secret unveiled before us was a reminder that our pasts are often more complicated than we can imagine, and that understanding and compassion were essential as we moved forward together. In that moment, as we confronted the truths of our family's history, I knew that our bonds had grown stronger. We were prepared to face the future as a united family, no matter what challenges lay ahead. Our journey had been filled with surprises and revelations, but it had ultimately led us to a deeper connection and a newfound appreciation for the strength of family ties.